Hi, I'm Pat Thatcher.
And I'm Margaret Gifford, and we're from Sotheby's International Realty.
And you know, Margaret, I think the word that best describes this real estate market this year is opportunistic.
I think that's a great word to describe what the real estate market's doing now.
I think it is also, and that says if you're a seller, by golly, get your house ready correctly.
And if you're a buyer, do your homework.
So if you want to be part of this opportunistic real estate market, jump
on that horse.
Carlson Printing for all your printing needs. 508-548-7303 or toll free at 1-800-696-7303. Our email address is carlsonprinting@aol.com. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs.
Hosting services for fctv.org are provided by Meganet Communications. Meganet offers a wide array of internet services, including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server colocation, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their number one goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or meganet.net.
Hi everyone, welcome to the August 20th Board of Selectmen meeting. It's 6:30. We are starting open session and heading right to executive session under General Laws Chapter 30A 21A3 for discussion on fire collective bargaining. And as chair, I state to not go into executive session would prejudice the town's position. We will return to open session thereafter at 7.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call?
Brown, aye.
Patterson, aye.
English Praga, aye.
Moran, aye.
Jones, aye.
Thank you. Hello everybody, welcome back to the August 20th Board of Selectmen meeting. The board has just returned from executive session and is now starting the open session meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a couple of proclamations. Does anybody want to read the first with respect to Suicide Prevention Month?
I can read it if no one
Sure,
else wants
Sam.
to. Sure.
Please.
Whereas in the United States, one person dies by suicide every 12 minutes, and 121 people die by suicide each day. Whereas 20 veterans die by suicide each day. And whereas suicide is the second leading cause of death for Massachusetts residents ages 15 through 44, and the suicide rate on the Cape and Islands is 1.4 times higher than the state average. And whereas suicide is a tragic and disruptive event for families and communities, it is estimated that annually there are 6.3 million lost survivors who have lost a loved one to suicide. And whereas suicide is a public health issue and a community concern, and through increased education and awareness of the issue, a great number of suicides can be prevented. Therefore, we, Susan L. Moran, Megan English Braga, Douglas Jones, Samuel H. Patterson, and Douglas C. Brown, as Selectmen of the Town of Falmouth, by the authority vested in us, do hereby officially designate the week of September 9th through the 15th, 2018, as Suicide Prevention Week in Falmouth.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Happy to read the next one.
Thanks. Doug, with respect to College Light Opera Company Day?
I'm delighted to have an opportunity to read this proclamation. This is an organization that both my parents were on the board of directors for many years, and my father was the president for about 25 years. Whereas the College Light Opera Company was formed in 1969 by Robert Haslam, D. Thomas Tull, and Terence Tobias, the three founders embarked on an exciting journey to bring light opera and music theater back to the Highfield Theater. And whereas over the next few years, the College Light Opera Company would begin to establish itself as a perennial summer activity on Cape Cod, and whereas Clock moved to its present location in West Falmouth in 1975 in the former West Falmouth Inn, this 6-acre campus provides housing and dining for its some 85 company members. And whereas Ursula Haslam joined Robert Haslam and became co-producers in 1981, and whereas Mr. and Mrs. Haslam retired in 2015, handing the company over to E. Mark Murphy as producer and executive director, and Mark A. Pearson as producer and artistic director. Whereas Clock is an educational institution giving each college-age student a well-rounded educational experience, there are 32 highly talented vocalists, 18 promising orchestral musicians, 12 gifted scenic and costume technicians, and 4 capable administrators. And whereas many of the 3,500 Clock alumni may be found today as singers, actors, arts, and other nonprofit administrators, set designers, lighting designers, costume designers, theater technicians, and critics in the United States and abroad. And whereas the College Light Opera Company is celebrating its 50th season in 2018. And whereas over these past 50 years, Clock has brought a great deal of pleasure and memories to both company and community members alike. Now, therefore, we, Susan L. Moran, Megan English Braga, Doug Jones, Samuel H. Patterson, and Douglas C. Brown, as Selectmen of the Town of Falmouth, by the authority vested in us, do hereby proclaim August 26, 2018 as College Light Opera Company Day.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Terrific. Next, recognition, Ms. Braga.
Sure. So really a huge weekend. Obviously, we had a road race, which so many people participate in. It takes a lot of folks to have that run as smoothly as it did, and to welcome all of those runners and their families to town for the weekend. But I wanted to really recognize, we had our second listening session on Saturday, and I want to say a huge thank you to Administrative Assistant Phyllis Downey, who showed up very early at St. Anthony's to set up. It's a Saturday, it's road race weekend, and she was there before anyone else was, setting up the space. And a big thank you to Peter Johnson-Staub, who was there as well, going back and forth and getting the refreshments for everyone. And a very big thank you to all those who came to participate. We know it was a tough date, but we wanted to get it done. We really wanted to make sure that we kept the momentum going. And it was a packed room. We heard a lot of very helpful critiques, some ideas, just exactly what we had hoped we would get, which is some real detail in terms of what people are concerned about, what they care about, and where they think the town should be heading. So a big thank you to everyone who participated, and certainly we'll be continuing this process going forward.
But one thing I thought was a big takeaway was the fact that there were a lot of folks who appreciate you get a really big bang for the buck in Falmouth, and that as our need for services and our infrastructure needs increase, people recognize that's an expense to towns. And, you know, that when you have and want good service, you know, you have to be prepared to pay for it. And that Falmouth right now is really doing a lot with a little. So that was a big takeaway for me.
And you know what was a big takeaway for me from the road race, attending the banquet after, was the millions and millions of dollars that they're raising for charities, you know? It's just incredible. And
Some of
a lot of
which
that money
comes
comes back.
Absolutely right.
And that's a direct result of all the people volunteering.
Great, great event. Next, we have public comment. Public comment is an opportunity to speak on.
Announcements,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry, announcements. I skipped one. I thought that was an announcement.
I have one
Go for
quick
it.
announcement. Let's see, September 8th, the Portuguese American Association, the Navigator off of 151, is going to have their annual luau. It is a pig roast. It's a great event. It's a real family-friendly event. And if you don't want to eat the roasted pig, there's lots of other very good things to eat. Tickets are available. You can go, I think there'll be flyers that are around town, and you can contact individuals, or you can contact me if you'd like a ticket. But it's a great family event, something really different, and just a nice way to kind of kick off fall. So.
And people dress for it. I mean,
Oh, yes.
they wear
Yeah.
Hawaiian shirts.
Yes, it's
and
an
such.
opportunity to wear the shirt you can't wear any other day of the year, so it's a good time.
Okay, any other announcements? Okay, back to public comment, an opportunity to speak on an item not on the agenda. There is a total of 10 minutes allowed at 2-minute limit per person. Is there anyone here who would like to speak for public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to our next, which is summary of actions. Under licenses, an application for new common victular license, Eat Your Heart Out Cafe and Gourmet Market at 587 Main Street. I believe I saw Sean. Do you want to stand up and just give us a headline here, what you're looking for?
Use the mic.
Welcome.
Good evening, Board. Yes, I'm opening up a new gourmet market called Eat Your Heart Out Cafe. It's the second location. I have a catering company now at 79R Davis Straits. And we are in the process right now of going into the Longfellow Building there on Main Street. We are letter B, should I say. And
don't forget to tell the audience at home who you are.
what's that?
Don't forget to tell us who you
Your
are.
name, you have to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Sean Daly, chef owner of Eat Your Heart Out Catering Company.
Thank you.
Yes.
Questions from the board? Thoughts?
Just curious, it wasn't clear to me, are you going to just do your part of the building, or are you going to manage the building?
Yep, so there is two spaces, there's an A and a B, and we're on the B side.
Okay.
It's roughly 1,600 square feet, and we will be managing our own side, and then there's another business going to the other side.
Okay.
Sam?
To give you a chance to do a little PR or advertising, just what do you expect the menu to be?
So we're doing, it's going to be a bit of sit-in, it's going to be all takeout packaging, but we're going to be doing specialty sandwiches, soups, we'll be doing prepared foods. I started a fit meal company, a lot of gluten-free, celiac options, things like that, a lot of plant-based meals as well, so a lot of grab-and-go, the specialty sandwiches.
Great.
I understand there will be a requirement to come back for the flow neutral bylaw variance. I'm not sure if that's whether Sean does that or
For
that's
the
the building.
property owner, to
For
the
the
best of my
property owner.
knowledge, yes.
Okay.
So you don't need to worry about that.
I don't,
Oh, yeah?
I guess not.
Is
I'm a
there a
food guy.
motion?
I move approval?
Second?
Let's all second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.
Look forward to
Next, we have an
opening the door. Take
application
care.
for a one-day liquor license, Falmouth Historical Society, 50 to 65 Palmer Ave, Oktoberfest Beer BQ, Friday, October 5th, 2018.
I move approval.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have an application for a one-day liquor license, Falmouth Theater Guild, Highfield Theater, 58 Highfield Drive, for Friday, September 14, Saturday, September 15, and Sunday, September 16.
Move approval?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have an application for a one-day liquor license for Barnstable County Agricultural Society Harvest Fest and Comedy Fest for Saturday, September 22nd, and Sunday, September 23rd.
Move approval?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have an application for 13 one-day liquor licenses for On the Water Outfitters at 707 T-Ticket Highway, Fun on the Water Customer Appreciation Open House, one per month from August 2018 to 2019. Is the applicant here for this? Oh, I'm sorry about that. I don't know how anyone else feels, but I'm not sure this is what the one-day liquor licenses are meant to be. When you think about, it's sort of like the person who wanted a sign permission for like every day of, for 6 months or something. I'm a little bit concerned about the concept of every business in town doing a liquor license for, a year, and how that would even be managed. So I'm wondering if maybe if there's any other interest by any other member of the board to hold this until an applicant can be here.
When I first saw it on the agenda, I was a little surprised, but after thinking it through, I don't really see the harm, but if you want to have them in, I guess I'd go along with that.
Does anyone recall if we've ever granted a liquor license to On the Waters?
I think it's
To On the
30
Water?
30 a year, isn't it?
No, I'm asking
No,
if
I
we've done
don't
it to
think
On the
so.
Water.
I don't think so.
Because I guess I might just want, conceptually, I don't have a problem if it's one sort of designated day, but the other pieces, there's no, I guess they've chosen the days here.
They're all Thursdays.
They're all
I guess I'd feel more
Thursdays.
comfortable saying, let's try this year. And then at the end of this year, if they want to apply for next year, make the decision at that point.
I would agree. I would not feel comfortable denying it for the August 30th, for instance, if in fact we were going to change our minds, because that would exclude that date.
And the issue with trying it for a year is every business in town trying it for a year is really what I'd be hesitant about.
But I guess, in other words, they could come forward each month, and we would probably, so you're saying you don't like the concept, you're concerned, not don't like, but you're concerned about the concept of each business kind of having a customer appreciation day where they have alcohol kind of on a regular basis.
Right, and it's, I don't know if it's a customer appreciation day.
I think
when
that's
it's
just what
so
they're calling it. I'm just
repetitive.
yeah,
Right,
I'm
right,
just calling it that, but
exactly.
yeah.
But if they have
Sure.
the ability to request 30 per year, and they're only looking for 12 or 13, it's not like they're going overboard, it's just that it's such a long span, that we haven't seen it before.
I think her point is, if 50 different businesses did it, where would we draw the line? Do we draw the line with the first one saying, we're not comfortable, or is it the 10th business to come forward and say, oh, we like this idea too? At what point, if it does become prevalent, are we going to say, actually, we're not so comfortable with that now?
And then the other question would be, should we allow just a few and see how they go before we commit to a whole year of it?
Or even just ask the applicant to appear, maybe allow, as Sam suggests, the one for the August. I think also the concept when you have the 30 limit, we've really seen it by nonprofits.
Right.
We haven't seen it as a, a fishing,
Commercial,
retail, clothing, it's a great store, great business. We haven't seen it as a creative retail marketing
Business
tool to
tool.
actually use.
I would move that we approve the August 30th date and then ask the applicant to come back afterwards to tell us how it went and request the few of the dates afterwards.
I'll second that.
Okay.
And as part of this discussion, I guess I have a question. Are they going to start giving out drinks on whenever they have these monthly gatherings?
Well, I think that's what we want, yeah.
I mean, it raises the question, is this a customer appreciation where they're giving out drinks? That's going to, of course, attract clientele, and I'm not sure I feel comfortable with that, since we don't know what clientele that might induce to come out,
And
just for the drinks.
That's the point, retail versus we normally see it as a fundraiser for a nonprofit, which is a cause the town shares in. So I think maybe we want to look at distinguishing this policy possibly, or at least go with Doug, I support Doug's motion,
Yeah,
certainly.
Because as a business venture, they do have an option of hiring a professional, like John's Liquor Store, for instance, would come with a tip certified They could provide a service.
Any policy decision like that, Megan?
Well, also, I guess, I think just holding it to hear how they think it's going to, is it gonna be something where I know I've been to places where, say, on Mother's Day, you go in to a retail place and there's a glass of champagne, or a small, so how do they anticipate it structured? Is it
Right.
gonna be, each person who goes in that day might get a small beer, or is it, they can have several drinks? So just to answer those questions.
Right.
What they've asked for is a secure area where alcohol will be sold and consumed.
Right,
They're not asking permission to give it away.
right.
And so all we're granting them is permission to sell it.
Mhm.
Anything different than that, we are not granting permission for.
Right.
If they choose to do it, that's on themselves. But
And I also wonder, when you're retail selling liquor, what does that do to our liquor license capacity? The town only gets so many liquor licenses.
the special licenses
Yeah,
are
I'm-
included in that, though.
Right, but I'm just saying, these are all kind of fuzzy areas that would be worth taking a little bit of time with. So, do we have a second on the
I
August
seconded it.
20 day?
I did.
All right, all those in favor?
August 20th?
Yes.
Aye.
Yeah.
And then we can.
August 30th.
August 30th.
30th,
excuse me.
rather,
30th.
and we'll hold the rest.
Aye.
And can we invite them?
So did we vote? All in favor?
We did.
We did, and can we just make sure that we reach out to them to come to our next meeting?
Certainly.
Well, and I think we need to go a step further than that and really talk to some people about what the impact might be. Maybe we should talk to Frank a little bit, see if there are any legal implications for issuing that many one-day licenses.
It's new, different, we want to be informed. Right, okay, thank you. Next, we have, let's see here, we're on to administrative orders. Vote to approve an application to Community Preservation Committee for the Falmouth Water Stewards for Community Preservation Recreation Grant Funds for installation of 8 water stations at 7 town recreation facilities.
So being the vice president of the water stewards, I guess I'm going to recuse myself, and should I leave or just not vote?
I think, there's no reason to recuse yourself. You just state there, because there's
Well,
no
I
financial.
He got
checked
an
with Frank
opinion.
Duffy, and he said that being an officer of the organization,
Okay.
I shouldn't be voting on it at least. I don't know if I,
You can sit there if you zip it.
okay.
I don't know, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Well,
The
we have to
understanding
be
is that we need to
careful.
do this because the town will actually end up owning these water stations.
Right.
So did Frank say that you had to,
He said I shouldn't be voting on it.
okay,
Right.
right.
Does that mean I
Exactly,
should leave?
No, I just think you just.
I would
you have to-
recuse yourself from the discussion as well.
Exactly, just recuse.
Right.
The
right.
cleanest way to do it is to leave the room. This is a really small, low level, you've got no financial interest, but truly, the nature of recusing means you don't participate in the conversation.
Right.
Okay, I'll take a break.
So I'll
Is
turn this
there
way. So
anyone
my
who wants
understanding
to
is that
make a
this is,
motion? Does anyone want to make a motion?
I would move approval of the application for the CPC.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nice try, Doug. Okay, next. The next is naming request to name the Emergency Operations Center, the EOC, the Paul D. Broder Emergency Operations Center. Mr. Sousa, would you tee this up for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We received a request from Fire Chief Mike Small to consider this naming of a public facility, and the chief is with us here this evening to make a few additional comments. The board will recall that you have a specific naming policy which was adopted a few years ago, which requires that when such a request comes in, you take it under advisement. A subcommittee is designated that solicits public comments, and that you give the process a full year prior to taking any definitive action on it. So that's the background, and Mike is here, maybe would care to make a few comments as well.
Welcome, Chief.
And maybe, if there's a reason for us to go against our policy, that would be great to hear also.
So
we do have
really,
that often.
this was an idea that we floated shortly after Chief Broder's untimely death. He was the sort of the grandfather of the current highly successful local emergency planning committee. He was the grandfather behind the establishment of that emergency operations center. When that station, when the addition was being built, he was the one that sort of was the driving force between taking that big meeting room and having all the technology and everything installed so it could be the emergency operations center, the current one that we use on a regular basis, that is very, very successful. And I just thought it would be appropriate to dedicate the room to him and name it the Paul D. Broder Emergency Operations Center. I think Mr. Suso caught this. I was sadly ignorant of the policy. I understand the room's not going anywhere. I would have done this a year ago if I'd have known that was the case, but it is what it is. And so that's really what we would like to do, is dedicate a plaque to him, put some signs over the doors that name it the Paul D. Broder Emergency Operations Center. And when the process plays itself out, we hope that's what we're able to do.
And he was the innovator of getting funding at town meeting with fun PowerPoint videos.
Yes.
And he would not be happy you were calling him the grandfather. But we'll let that.
Well, very true.
I think it's a really great idea and so fitting. I mean, he just, was a figure in this town in so many different ways. So I think it's a wonderful tribute.
Great idea.
The letter we have from him isn't dated. Can we just date that August 10th, 2017?
Yeah, works for me. The plaque was about to be ordered, so we could, we can backdate it, that'd be great. But that's fine.
It is, as I think Mr. Duffy often points out, these are Board of Selectmen's policies. We can always adjust the policy if we, for every reason, determine that we want to do something other than what our policy states.
Well, I think maybe we can look at this a little bit early. If we've, now it's been aired in public. People can think about it and, maybe think about expediting it after, it's had a chance to be publicized.
We had originally hoped to do this at the first or second meeting. We take a break over the summer, and then for hurricane preparedness season, we're going to start meeting again in September. So that would be great. We could certainly make that happen. If you
Maybe the compromise is that we look at this next year, as in 2019, in our first January meeting, that gets us a years looking at it as opposed to 12 months.
Great.
But Mike,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we can't hold a hearing sooner, as you suggested. This is guidance to us. And just give people a chance to respond. That's what I would feel more comfortable with. And if we can
agree.
make the announcement, and we can put it on our agenda, and then give people the opportunity to come in and speak to us, give us a broader perspective than the one that the chief has just given us. I mean, I'm all on board on this, but I do think we do need to represent the will
And
of the
Doug's
community.
suggesting January for that.
That's fine with me, but
Well, I mean, if we want to go by the policy, it is then to wait some time and then appoint a subcommittee of 2 selectmen to get some input from other people, to actively go get input, and then make a recommendation back to the board. And so it could be just that we start that process right away of having the 2 selectmen subcommittee to come back and make the presentation, and then have the hearing with the timetable of maybe December, January, we can actually
I like that
do
idea.
the vote.
I
Is
like
there
that
anyone
idea.
besides
I'll
Doug
do it.
who's
Okay.
doing it?
I would volunteer for that subcommittee. Having served with Paul in the East Falmouth Village Association, I'd be happy to do that.
So,
Can you have 2 Dougs on that?
yeah, we can have 2 Dougs on that. All right, let's go with that one.
Great.
Okay.
And then you can get back to us. I
Thank
like
you
that
very
idea.
much.
Thank you.
So the
Appreciate
you
2
very
Dougs are on the subcommittee.
Okay.
Great.
Next, we have a vote to authorize town council and town manager to respond to an open meeting law complaint regarding the Board of Selectmen's minutes of July 9, 2018, approved on July 23, 2018. Is there a motion?
That's the letter that was in our packet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And they, oh, sorry, go ahead, Doug.
I move to authorize town council to respond.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have whether to approve the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust closing documents. Mr. Suso.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. As you'll recall, we've been in the multi-year process of working with the Clean Water Trust in regard to the our utilities upgrades, water and wastewater, and we are now at the point where we can be looking at closing documents regarding the water filtration facility, and Finance Director Jennifer Petit is here with us to make some additional comments on that closing process.
Is it a 2-minute process, or I just realized it's 7:30?
we have a hearing scheduled.
It should be 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Then please go forward.
She's coming back anyway.
Okay, this is the last loan of the water filtration plant. They approved loans over, one loan for the $45 million was over a 3-year period. We've been drawing down on this loan. This is really the end of the Little Pond, the Little Pond Sewer Service Project and the water filtration plant, but this loan is for the water filtration plant. It's the last document that needs to be signed. and they're going out to bond. We'll start paying principal and interest on it next year, next fiscal year. And so it's just a closing document with the selectmen's signatures, and you can sign right where the blue tabs are.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Move approval?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bring
you.
it forward, we'll sign that up.
Thanks very much.
We're going to move to the 7:30 wetlands hearing, which is Brewer Fiddler's Cove Marina at 42 Fiddler's Cove Road, North Falmouth. Proposed maintenance dredging, Fiddler's Cove Canal in Megansett Harbor. The public hearing notice is as follows. The Falmouth Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing under Section 240-77 wetland regulations of the zoning bylaws of the town of Falmouth on Monday, July 23rd, 2018 at 7:50 p.m. in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, Falmouth Town Hall, on the application of Brewer Fiddler's Cove Marina for permission to perform maintenance dredging of Fiddler's Cove entrance channel located at 42 Fiddler's Cove Road, North Falmouth. Area affected is Fiddler's Cove Canal and Megansett Harbor. Interested parties may review the file on this hearing at the Selectmen's Meeting Office. For order, the Board of Selectmen, publication dates were July 6 and July 13, and notice was to abutters. Welcome.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Leslie Fields with the Woods Hole Group, and I was here about a month ago, I think, asking for a wetlands permit for Brewer's Fiddler's Cove to do some maintenance dredging at the entrance. They want to dredge up to about 500 cubic yards annually, and to take that material, offload it to trucks, and then originally the plan was to take it to the town's storage facility on Blacksmith Shop Road, and then they would use it on the town beaches. But on the day that I came to the hearing last time, we heard from the neighbors at Seascape that they'd like to be able to use some of that material for beach nourishment. We were worried that maybe they didn't have the permits and just wanted to double check on that. We did find that they do have a valid, open and valid order of conditions for beach nourishment, and so we wanted to add them as a possible placement site for the dredge materials.
Thank you.
So we've submitted a letter with the order of conditions attached for Seascape, and would like to add that to our permit application.
Great. Any questions, Doug?
I see that the dredging is 500 cubic yards, but the nourishment is only 90.
Correct, yes. So most of it will still be taken to the town's facility.
And that's just the limit of their...
That's the limit of their permit, yes.
Okay.
You stole my question.
Is there a motion in that case?
Move, we have to public comment? This is continued
Oh,
hearing?
right, it is a continued hearing. Is there anyone here who is in favor of this request? Sir, please come up. Let us know your name.
I'm Timmy Oliver, I'm the president of Seascape Association. And we've been a very good steward of the beach properties that we have. We have 2 beach properties in the association. One of them is at B Beach. It abuts the canal that they're going to dredge. And we've actually gotten sand from them before, and our permits are up to date, as Leslie knows. And we're a good neighbor of Fiddler's Cove as well, so we'd like to get the sand to renourish our beach.
Really smart of you to recognize the opportunity. Always great to see folks working together so well. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in favor of this application? Mark.
Yeah, Mark Finneran, Precinct 6. It appears that this is a private undertaking, and I'm totally in favor of it, but as I said before, the people in Perch Pond have been trying to dredge their pond at their own expense, and they haven't been allowed to, and all you need to do is take a drive up there and open your nostrils, and you'll see that that place should be accorded the same rights as these people have. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak in favor of this application? Seeing no further, is there anyone who would like to speak against this application? Seeing none.
Move to close the hearing?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there a motion?
Move approval?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for your work.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. We have a few minutes before the next public hearing. Pardon?
This is the last.
Yeah. We're going to go on the last administrative order under the agenda, which is the appointment of Sam Patterson to the Regional Transit Authority RTA Advisory Board. Thank you, Sam, for stepping up.
I would move approval of the appointment.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
With gratitude.
Transportation, there's no one better.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
A little,
Have
a
you ever
little
ridden a
bit.
bus?
You know them.
Great. Next, we'll go the special event 3A, Buzzards Bay Watershed Ride, bike path from Old Dock Road to Swoop Center and BL Street, Buzzards Bay Coalition, on Sunday, September 30, 2018. Is someone here from Buzzards Bay Coalition? Okay, is there a feeling on behalf of the board?
I move approval.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have under new recommended a beach wedding ceremony for Delaney Moran at Falmouth Heights Beach for Saturday, June 8, 2019.
I move approval. I saw the responses, and Beach Superintendent McGardo approved it. Didn't seem to have a problem with it.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have SOS Cape Cod Rise for Climate, Surf Drive Beach, Saturday, September 8, 2018.
Do we have anyone from here, that organization today?
Is anyone here? I didn't see anyone. Did you have a question?
Just trying to understand exactly what they were going to do.
Sounds like a gathering.
It is a gathering.
And then a couple of speakers, I think it said without microphones, and then they're gonna spell out, it
It's
looks
like
like SOS to take pictures, to put on social media to promote their future actions.
And they expect about 60 or 65 people, and they're going to pay to park or find their own way down there.
Very artsy.
Very early, and pretty early.
Yep.
Because the parking lot will not be attended at that point, so
Right.
they actually won't really have to be paying to get in.
Unless we send somebody down there.
That's what Barb Schneider would want us to do.
Yep.
What is the board's pleasure in that case? Do you want to hold it? Do you want to move it?
I would move approval. I think, I know Ms. Carey for some other events, and I think she's a fairly rule-abiding and conscientious person, so I think she'll probably promote that type of behavior with this group, and I'm not sure if they'll get 60. I hope that they do, but I'm not sure if 50 or 60 on the Saturday morning is
I'll second it.
accurate.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I will take the next hearing. By the time I read the notice, we'll be right on time here. It's an application to amend the fuel storage license, installation of above-ground storage tank for Class 2 diesel fuel. Savon Hayden LLC, 561 Thomas B. Landers Road, Hatchville. Public hearing notice is as follows. Notice is hereby given that the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Falmouth will hold a public hearing on Monday, August 20, 2018, at 7:55 p.m. in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, Town Hall, Falmouth, Mass. On the application are Mark and Tonis Properties LLC for a, whoops, am I reading the wrong? I think I skipped one, sorry, guys.
Yep.
Oop, they're a little mixed up. All right, strike that. On to, notice is hereby given a public hearing to be held in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, Town Hall, Falmouth, Mass., Monday, August 20, 2018, at 7:45 p.m., rescheduled from Monday, July 23, 2018, on the application for amendment of fuel storage license of Savon Hayden LLC for permission to install one 8,000-gallon above-ground storage tank, AST, for the storage of 2 diesel fuel to be located at 561 Thomas Landers Road, Falmouth, Mass. A publication date was Friday, August 10, 2018. Welcome, council.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Hal Chuba. I'm a consulting engineer with offices at 112 State Road in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, and I'm here representing Savon LLC on this application. I do have the notices here too, just in case.
Please. Thank you. Great.
As you have read, actually, this is an amendment to an existing license.
Right.
Back in 2015, we came to this board. At that time, it was in connection with the construction of a 5,000 square foot building to be used for the truck terminal for Savon LLC.
Excuse me, sir, you need to grab the mic and carry it with you.
Yeah.
It's for the audience at home.
Absolutely. So back in 2015, we came to this board in connection with the construction of 5,000 square foot building for the parking of fuel trucks at 516 Thomas B. Landers. This board granted a license for 5 trucks. Each truck has a capacity of 12,000 gallon. That's a 60,000 gallon capacity total on the facility. Since then, Mr. Haddam constructed the facility, and he had no trouble for the past 2 years. We had no issues whatsoever with traffic or access. But at this time, Mr. Haddam would like to install an 8,000 gallon of diesel fuel on site to be used just for the purpose of fueling his own truck. And we believe by doing this, we can alleviate some of the traffic in town, and we can eliminate the need of the large trucks to travel through local streets to go fuel on other stations. This facility is located in the industrial zone district. It's easy access off the highway. The trucks will be coming in at night after the shift. In the morning, they can fill up and leave, get on the highway and leave. There's no need to go through the town. And as I said, Mr. Haddam has been there for almost 2 years with no incidents. The proposed above ground tank would be double wall with a containment area, has the capacity of 100% of the tank itself. So the containment pad could hold 8,000 gallon on site also. On top that, the tank is being 2 double wall tank. This has been reviewed by the fire department. We went through the zoning board of appeal. I believe I sent copies of the ZBA approval for the board.
We received, thank you.
And all offices, engineering, water department, everybody reviewed the plans, and we would be in compliance with all applicable federal, local, and state agencies, fire and environmental. So we're here to amend the license to add the 8,000 gallon of our fuel tank. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Sure. Doug?
Is there any restriction from making sure it's only for these trucks as opposed to then becoming a fueling station for other diesel trucks?
Yes, I think that was a condition on the ZBA. So okay. This is only for Savon LLC to fuel their trucks.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, I would move approval. Seems clear.
Oh,
I'm sorry, excuse me.
That's okay, hearing. So, very favorable presentation, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak against this application? Seeing none.
I move we close the hearing.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion or other discussion?
I would move approval now.
Second. Any other discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, our next hearing is at 7:55, so we will move to...
Sign variances?
That's a great one. Under number 4, there's a request for a sign variance, on-premise promotional sign, John Wesley United Methodist Church, 270 Gifford Street. Is there anyone here for the presentation? Nope.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have a request for a sign variance for off-premise promotional sign for the Falmouth Rotary Club Craft Fair. Is there anyone from the Rotary here? Nope. Feeling of the board on that request?
I would move approval. I mean, the Rotary Club is a fabulous organization, and I see all the places that they've listed. And it's something that we've done before, so.
Is there a second?
I'd second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Just note that I am a member of the Rotary. but don't have any financial vested interest in it.
Great. I think next we'll take the presentation on the status of the water system from Steve Rafferty, I can't say your name tonight, Water Superintendent. Welcome.
Just let it warm up a second.
It'll take more than a second.
Thank you for inviting me here this evening. I am Steve Rafferty, Precinct 2, I'm the town's water superintendent. And I'm here before you tonight to talk to you about how the water system's going. There have been some interesting moments over the last few weeks. Terrific. So we built a brand-new water treatment plant, which means we're putting water into the system from a different location with a different pumping regime on it. And so the Long Pond water treatment plant's, the size and location has changed the flow and pressure within the distribution system, and has changed the operational plan for the storage tanks. There's two things going on that are getting everybody's attention. There's a couple of sections of town where we're finding it difficult to maintain adequate pressure and flow in the early morning hours, particularly between 5 and 7. And we've had a series of water main breaks, and I'd like to walk through both of those elements and what's going on. So this is a little clip off of an overall water distribution map. The area in the upper right-hand corner is a boundary line for what we call the high pressure, high service area, which includes Ballymeads and portions of the industrial park. Before that elevated tank was built there used to be a tank over in West Falmouth, up behind the West Falmouth Library, up above the ball field, at a place called Telegraph Hill, which is the circled section to the lower left right there. The moraine does stretch across the highway. There's a section over on the eastern side, Durfee Drive. When the homes were built over in Telegraph Hill, there was no requirement for anybody to put booster pumps or do anything about it, even though they're at an elevation that's quite a bit higher than other parts of the town. At the time, having the water tank sitting right next to them, it was pretty easy to get some water to a booster pump or keep your water. On the other hand, when the Durfee Drive area was developed, there was a requirement to put in booster pumps. Durfee Drive's about 10 feet lower than the Telegraph Hill area. So, what's the pressure issue? When we had a pumping station and a reservoir and no need to do any treatment, we could just turn on pumps all we wanted to until we ran out of pumps to turn on, and not worry too much about what the tank levels were, because we were pumping water to the system at maximum pressure. When we built a new water treatment plant, we no longer had the luxury, if you will, of just pumping as much as we wanted, because we sized the plant to treat a certain amount of flow. The treatment's based upon loading rates and surface loading. So what we find is the current operation has to maximize the use of the storage tanks, as well as the available pumping in the new facility and other facilities to meet to the system. With the Fresh Pond well offline, it's exacerbating a little bit of how much you can pump, how fast in the early morning. One of the things we did is we modified valves at the storage tanks so that we can fill the storage tanks up in sequence all the way and have the water tanks full. However, every morning between 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., there's a huge spike in demand in the system during the summer months, directly attributable to the irrigation systems coming on between that time in the morning. On an instantaneous rate, we need to be able to put a flow rate of around 17 million gallons into the system over those 2 hours every morning right now. Not for the whole day, but at that rate. The translation of that is that we see a drop in the Tech Park tank, the lower level Tech Park tank, which translates into a loss of pressure over in Telegraph Hill. We've been working to minimize that impact by changing the way we move water between the high service area, from the low service to the high service area. And we're involved in a programming change so we can start to change how we actually disinfect at the treatment plant to be able to pump some of the volume out of the disinfection base in the early morning hours into the system. Keeping in mind, we want to be able to do that in an automated way, not a manual way. So this is something we learned as we saw the peak demands of the summer. As you recall, we didn't bring the plant online until October, so this has really been our test this summer of what happens in the system and what we have to do. I'm going to suggest there's a couple of actions that we should consider taking to make 2019 a much better summer. First off, we currently have what is known as a voluntary conservation ban. We voluntarily ask you to only irrigate on odd, even days. There's really no teeth to that right now. We can go around and ask people to do that, but they don't have to. I'm going to come back to you before 2019 kicks in and make a request that that become mandatory, that you can only water on odd days if you're in an odd number house or even days if you're in an even numbered house. That'll give us a little more ability to say to people, hey, you know, you be a good citizen, don't feel a need to irrigate every single day, every single night. And that'll help to cut back on some of that demand. The other one I talked about is we're changing some of the operational parameters in the new treatment plant to be able to utilize the volume that's in the disinfection basin to pump that water into the system early in the morning. And then during the course of the day, as we treat through the plant, we'll fill that basin back up along with the tank. So we're basically going to turn it into another storage tank for the system. And then the third one, we do have a request at town meeting to do some looking at long-term needs and evaluation of the system, capital asset plan, capital efficiency plan. And I think it warrants looking at the long-term options. Should we route a pipeline across the town land to get over to the Durfee area? Should we try to get a pipeline under the highway? Should we put another small storage tank back over by Telegraph Hill? Or should we modify some of the piping in that area with a dedicated boosters for the area? But that'll take a little bit of thought, and there'll be some financial issues to that. I've already submitted my capital plan for the year. I didn't show that in the out years because I'm counting on doing the sort of the capital efficiency plan and seeing what happens over the next several years on it. The other one we've got.
Are those the only places in town that have had the water pressure? Because I thought we also had an issue from someone over in the Greengate area.
We had a couple of calls. There was a morning recently where one of the sampling pumps, a component on it failed, and the plant, as it's intended to, shut itself down. Of course, it failed it right around 5 o'clock in the morning. We saw a drop in tank level at several tanks. We got quite a bit of people saying I have lower water pressure than usual at a number of places. That was a one-day thing. Okay. We've changed the maintenance schedule for the portion of the peristaltic pump that can wear out. We found out that it was wearing out at the 900 to 1,000 hours. If you do the math, and we change it once a month, we're well under the 1,000 hours. So we're going to change that tubing monthly during the summer and probably twice a month, every second month during the winter.
How many residents is it in the Durfee, Telegraph Hill area?
Telegraph Hill's probably 12 to 20 residents that are really affected, although there's probably about 35 in the entire Telegraph Hill. The Durfee area is someplace in that same number of 15 to 20.
So another option might just be individual booster pumps in those houses.
Well, on Durfee, they couldn't build without the booster pumps.
Okay.
Telegraph Hill, they were not told to do that by the planning board or anybody because the houses were built at the time where the tank used to be over there.
But an expense the town could take instead is to support the individual houses.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of residents over there that have a fairly long service line. They're 1 inch. They probably worked back when they had a tank there, and now it's exacerbated.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rafferty, do you want to save the second issue till after our 7:55 hearing?
I would love to.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Our 7:55 hearing is the flow neutral bylaw, evaluation of request for variance. Marcantonis Properties LLC, 117 Main Street, Falmouth, parcel 47A 07064 001. The hearing notice is as follows. Notice is hereby given that the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Falmouth will hold a public hearing on Monday, August 20, 2018, at 7:55 PM in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, Town Hall, Falmouth, on the application of Marcantonis Properties LLC for a wastewater flow variance under Chapter 180, Section 56 of the Code of Falmouth, the so-called flow neutral bylaw, for a restaurant at 117 Main Street in said Falmouth, parcel 47A070640001. Publication date was Friday, August 10, 2018, in the Falmouth Enterprise. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Brett Sanitas, and I'm here this evening representing Marcantonis Properties LLC. As you read, this is for the property at 117 Main Street, the former Eastern Bank, currently being renovated into Estia Restaurant. We're here for a variance from the flow neutral bylaw, primarily because we've got a change in use on the property. And under the bylaw, if there's more than a 10% increase in flow, given the change of use, you need to come in and seek a variance. You'll see probably in your paperwork that the bank's sewer flow on average is about 587 gallons per day. The anticipated flow with the restaurant, being a 194-seat restaurant, is 6,790 gallons per day. So obviously, we're exceeding that 10%. Under the bylaw, we're really looking for whether there is sufficient sewer capacity to take on that additional flow at this point. I believe in your package there should be a letter from Amy Lowell dated August 9th, 2018, where she basically examines the water flow that we provided with her, mentions that in 2017 we did in fact receive a connection permit from the town of Falmouth. And taking into account the wastewater flow from the existing sewered areas, the new Little Pond sewer service area, assuming everyone is connected, in addition to other currently proposed projects, that there is sufficient sewer system capacity to take on Estia's additional flow.
Thank you. I'll just ask the water superintendent to come up since she's here, just to give a kind of big picture. I know the board also voted a policy for such requests. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Amy Lowell, the wastewater superintendent. As was just mentioned, I did write a brief memo to the Board of Selectmen saying that yes, indeed, there is sufficient wastewater system capacity for this sewer connection. This was one of the number of projects that was already underway and fully envisioned during the joint meeting that was held a number of months ago. And so it was taken into account in the future capacity or future needs category. So the outline was given pretty well about why this needed to be discussed, but there is sufficient capacity for it. You also, I believe, had the Board of Health had a ruling on this as well that I believe was in your packet.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board, Sam?
Yeah, just quickly, Amy, could you remind us just how close are we to hitting that 80% point where we have to start planning for expansion of our capacity?
So it's more complicated than I would like it to be, or than any of us would like it to be. But there are a couple of things going on in terms of looking at flow. One is the Title V numbers and sort of a peak demand number, which is what each of these requests is based on. So the numbers that were just provided were a Title V number, a peak flow number. What we see at the plant, at the wastewater treatment plant on an average annual basis is obviously different from that. It's a lower number. And the 80% threshold in our permit is on the average annual basis. And it's an actual flow. It's not a projected number. It's what it says in our groundwater discharge permit is when when your flow reaches 80% of your permit limit, you need to begin to plan for future capacity, or you need to provide the DEP with a plan to accommodate that capacity. So we are not yet seeing this flow. This is flow that has been permitted, but obviously I'm tracking all of it. As far as peak flow, you know, we are more than 80% of that. Let's see. If you add up all of the demands on the system so far, the existing sewer and the Little Pond sewer service area, and the peak demands for the new systems, then we appear to be at or above the 80% number. But that doesn't trigger a permit evaluation until we're there and using that on an average annual basis.
So, quick question on that, in terms of the way it's calculated. For, you know, on the Cape, we oftentimes have to build for our peak, you know, tourism season, our peak use. We have to, in other words, we have to pay for 9 months for the high level of service that we need in the summer. How does that work with the number that you're calculating?
So that is what we do have to track that and take that into account. What has been permitted to date and what is envisioned to, you know, what's been discussed before the Board of Selectmen to date is within the peak capacity of our wastewater treatment plant and system. So it is accounted for within that system.
But, so this is what now I know that I'm not crazy, at least as to this issue, because this is what I was talking about when we first had this question about the proposed hotel, that we're using peak numbers because that's what is required. Yep. But in fact, we haven't hit those numbers yet because it's throughout the entire year. It's on an annual basis to trigger the 80%. That 80% triggers based on on an actual number over the course of the year.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So, you know, I think it's really important, because we had a lot of questions with that Amy's doing her due diligence, as she should, in looking at kind of worst case, if we want to, you know, just, you know, worst case scenario in terms of peak usage of all of these projects that are in the pipeline at various stages of development, but where our actual flow isn't at that trigger yet.
Right, and we do have to be concerned about peak flow as well, as you pointed out. But I'm tracking both numbers.
Right. Doug and then Sam?
I think Sam was waiting.
That doesn't matter. This should be quick. Where are we right now in our average flow compared to that 80% or compared to the 100%?
So that also is changing because because of the Little Pond sewer service area number. So we had, for a number of years, the flow was pretty stable to the plant. I'm looking at it now, at around 345,000, 350,000 gallons a day. It was for a number of years. And the projected flow from the Little Pond sewer service area is 260,000 gallons per day, annual average. We don't see that. We haven't seen that yet because those properties are connecting over time. Falmouth Heights is now 100% connected, but about 60% of Mara Vista is connected, and not all the commercial properties are connected. So we haven't seen that flow yet. In 2017, the average annual total flow to the plant was 390,000 gallons per day. So it was 50,000 gallons a day higher than historically it had been.
But at this point, I mean, given the seasonality, I mean, that average is not going to just shoot right up, right? I mean,
our peaks in the summer will get higher, and our average over time will
creep up.
Will creep up, and there's part of what helps minimize the duration of that creep is that we have deadlines for sewer connection. Falmouth Heights had to be connected by June of this year. Mara Vista and the remainder of T-Ticket has to be connected by April of 2019. So that we will, by 2020, we will have seen a full year of close to full connection for that for those areas.
Doug?
Are we at the point where we would like to start maybe mandating waterless toilets and automatic shut-off faucets and other conservation measures to try to extend our resource?
So this is something that probably the water department knows more about than I do, but there are state mandated and there are conservation measures that are mandated not by the wastewater department, but by other entities. You also probably know a fair amount of this from the building.
Mhm.
It's not something that I have focused on particularly.
Perhaps we could give a helpful pamphlet and say, are you aware that you're going to pay this much? And for instance, this could be your water bill, so you might want to consider additional measures, you know, something like that.
Sure. That both water and wastewater systems would benefit from additional conservation.
Right.
Great. Any other questions from the board?
No, just a thanks to Amy for, you know, I know it's a moving target, and I know it's kind of, you know, we haven't really been here before, so it's very helpful to, I think, every time someone comes before this board, we get more information as the process kind of plays itself out, so it's really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, is there anyone here who would like to speak against this application? Seeing none,
Move we close the hearing?
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And what would the board like to do?
I would move approval.
Second.
All those, Doug, discussion?
Just make sure this does fit into our,
Oh,
we had our
we would
list
go
of,
through it, yep.
of priorities as to when we could, I mean, I think we need to grant this variance to not do this variance for this restaurant that is, I hope, soon to open.
I think it would be bad faith for
I
us
think it'd be a
not to
terrible
approve
thing
it.
for us to do.
But I think it touches upon, I mean, that one of the criteria is sort of economic
Vitality.
vitality, and I
That's the
mean,
top one.
it's a big space, it's gonna provide some employment, I think it's gonna be a nice addition to Main Street. So I do think it's a good point to bring us back to our process, and I think it touches on that.
Absolutely. In that case, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I, off topic, ask projected opening date?
Oh,
Okay.
Right?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go back to Steve Rafferty. Thank you for allowing the interruption.
You just move it forward.
Hopefully, we'll be warmed up already.
Yep, sure.
Just to remind you, I'm still Steve Rafferty. I'm still the water superintendent, and I still live in precinct 2. So we talked a bit about the pressure. Quick summary here on the water main breaks. It's a lot easier for more people to see the water main breaks because they get a little bit dramatic sometimes. But again, back to a couple of things. One, we're now pumping water from a different location into the system, so the direction of flow's changed. In the summertime, we have our highest demands for water, so we've moved more water through the pipes in a slightly different pattern than we've been moving it. In order to fill up the tanks, the way we want to fill up the tanks and optimize the storage, we're actually running a portion of the system now at about 5 PSI higher pressure than normal. To put this a little bit into perspective, most of the pipes that we have in this town are designed for a minimum 150 PSI with some allowance of safety. Most of the pressures in town are between 65, 45, 65. So a 5 PSI pressure difference really shouldn't make a lot of difference unless, as we have in this system, some really old pipes. So pressurizing the system, moving the water around in different directions, we're discovering our weak spots in the system. To summarize the two main concerns we have a number of sections in town where we have 50-year-old AC water mains. You might recall we replaced the water line on Worcester Court because we were experiencing coupling/gasket failures on that line. The breaks we had on Minot are in a 50-year-old AC line, and they're similar breaks at the couplings. We had a couple out on Fresh Pond Road. Again, the rubber gasket at the coupling finally just gets to the point water starts squeezing by and erodes the pipe. So we know how to fix them. We know how to shut them down and get them fixed. And the other one is the cast iron lines. We've got cast iron lines that are, for a lot of sections of town, well over 100 years. Some of those lines, when they were put in right at sort of the tide line, if you will. The tide line's crept up a little bit, so we get two types of failures in common now. The ones at Bristol Beach, we've had recently 2 of them down there. When we're fixing those, we have to manage the tide coming into the excavation. We use the VACOL truck to do that, believe it or not. And so at high tide, the bottom of the pipe is in salt water now, and at low tide, it's not. So we lose the bottom of that pipe. That's the failure mode we see on those pipes. The one over on Falmouth Heights Road is the more classic old cast iron failure where the top of the pipe finally erodes out over time. The bottom gets a little bit of deposit on it. That helps to protect the bottom of the pipe from the flow of the water. The top of the pipe's got 110 years of water flowing by it with whatever is in it and just wears it down so it's so thin that the top of the pipe breaks or cracks off. I'm a perpetual optimist. I'd like to think that where we get 15 to 18 fairly substantial water main breaks every year, that getting 10 or 12 of them in the summertime will mean that next winter when it's 5 degrees out, we'll have fewer of them to do. We'll see. So what's the action we need to do here? Well, back to that November town meeting article for capital efficiency, really put together a list of how much and how big and how long and how many, and then take a hard look at what that means in terms of real-world costs. Since I've been here for 4 years, we did a piece of water main in front of Stop and Shop. We replaced a water main down by the Coast Guard. Both of those were the old cast iron portions of Main. We're going to town meeting to replace a very large segment all the way down Main Street. But I would suggest that we should be building a 20-year plan where we're designing, bidding, and building on a yearly basis going forward for the next 20 years. It won't be free. It will be part of looking at the cost of operating the system. It'll be part of coming back to you at some point and talking about the rates again and what the rates pay for and why you're getting value for your money when you pay your water rates. But with that, I open it up to any questions you have.
Doug?
It seems like we need some sort of an immediate fix for the people on Telegraph Hill. Would we then, the town, install some booster pumps? Or have you given that any thought? Is that an option?
Right now, I only know of 2 homes on Telegraph Hill that don't have a booster pump.
Okay.
Okay? The real issue is between 5 and 7, there's not even enough pressure for the booster pump to be efficient. So I'm hoping to have the programming change in hand at some point this week and be able to do a little testing of how that will work in the early mornings and see if that helps to get enough water back into the system to get us over the hurdle here. That's a better choice than going out and doing anything with booster pumps right now.
And another question, if I could.
Please.
So have we already thought about changing the timing on the fields irrigation? At least that would be, for our part, we could change the timers.
Which fields?
On any fields that are being irrigated.
So, good question. The majority, if not all, I don't want to be definitive here, but there are wells at the high school. There's the irrigation at the well. High school is irrigation. I believe the other fields have irrigation wells as well, Peter? Right? Right. The only place I know that is not on a well is the little park in front of the school administration building at T-Ticket. And we have, on occasion, just had that shut off. So the town's good about having wells at their fields. Okay, so that's not putting a demand on the system.
So let me ask the other, maybe you're going to ask this. So can we ask folks to, publicize the fact, in other words, if everyone did not irrigate between 5 and 7, would that solve this problem?
That would make it better. That would not make it better. It would make it go. It would really cut back on it. I mean, we graph how tank levels, and starting at about 440, 450, the tank level just starts to drop. It drops 6 to 7 feet in the course of 45 minutes. And we've done a number of things, like we've actually allowed the Ballymead tank to drop a little lower during that time, rather than trying to keep it refilled as fast as possible. We've pushed around where when we backwash the filters at the tank, that takes water out of the ability to put it in the system. So we've moved all of our backwashing of the filters into later in the morning or the afternoon. And like I said, we reset altitude valves. So it used to be we operated the storage tanks 3 to 4 feet below the overflow. We're now operating 1/2 foot below the overflow. So we've been optimizing as much as we can in the existing system, and one last thing we have available for this season is to change the way we run the disinfection tanks, and there's some calculations and concerns with how we disinfect and report to the state. I won't get into the nuances of how to do what's called the CT calculation, but we have to make CT, so we have to change a little bit. So it may result in a slight uptick in the amount of chlorine we use because we're going to be using a smaller volume at a portion of the morning. So we're working our way through that math and making sure that we maintain the high-quality water we're putting out to everybody at the same time.
So I guess we all need to spread the word that if people can change their timers to stop watering by 4 a.m., maybe it'll help.
Absolutely. Mr. Sousa, can we put a public service request on the town website to just ask everyone to voluntarily not irrigate between 5 and 7 a.m.?
Well, we have a request on now for voluntary every other day.
Right.
If you want to make it for 5 to 7 a.m. regardless of the day, we can change it to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, from an irrigation standpoint, if you irrigate, I don't irrigate my lawn, so I don't have the nuances of this down, but my understanding is you're better off irrigating, say, from 9 to 11 or 11 to 12 or something, because it's at nighttime and you get less evaporation. You irrigate in the morning, the sun comes up and it starts evaporating off, so it's not quite as efficient.
Well, some lawn aficionados will say, I don't want mold, so they want to be close to the early dawn.
Is that why they did that?
That's what I've heard
But it'd
too.
also be nice to have water come out of your faucet when you turn it on to, if you have a nice green lawn, but you or your neighbors can't shower.
Right.
I think, we're obviously working through something that's new, and we have a lot of people here in the summer that puts a strain on a system that has some great new components, but a lot of old components as well that we're trying to work with. So,
sure.
I think if folks can make that shift.
And just to help just a little bit with the perspective on this.
Yeah.
I do feel as though with the economy improving, people are more either A, willing to irrigate or willing to invest in putting in irrigation because they see it as an investment in their property. So last year in the month of July, we used 255 million gallons of water. This year in July, it's been hot, a little hotter than usual, I think. We've used 287 million gallons through the month of July, so that's a 35 MGD increase, or a million gallons a day additional water that we've been having to get from our sources and put into the system. So we're using more water.
With the new system, people feel like the water is higher quality and maybe they can drink it more than buying water. So
I encourage them to drink it more. It's actually a pretty good deal and it's damn good water.
Right. So I think that could be part of the increased use. Anything else, Sam?
Yeah, I'm concerned about guidance on the timing to make sure that there's time to recover when the peak, health use is in the morning. What would be the best recommendation for the time period for irrigation to occur?
Not all at once.
Right, he's not a grass expert, he said. The only thing he said is we don't want it between 5 and 7.
I think, just from driving around, I mean, I'm sensitive to driving by the same pieces of property every day that I see irrigating every morning.
Yeah.
I just think if we could get to even odd, it'll cut off a little bit of that real peak in the morning a bit. And I do believe that when we adjust the way we're going to do disinfection, that I'm going to be able to put quite a bit more water into the system. I've got a magic number of about 800 gallons a minute more from doing modeling of the system. That my first picture there where I showed 7 PSI at Telegraph Hill, that's the situation we have now. I can get the disinfection done and move another 700 or 800 gallons a minute into the system. It pushes the pressure back up to the 12 to 14 PSI range, which is more than adequate for the booster pumps to, pull water up and raise the pressure in the individual units.
But I think what Sam is asking, just for sort of the public, if people want to be good stewards, you're saying the every other day, it's voluntary now, but to comply with that, and maybe if they want to, consult with their landscapers or take a look at shifting that time out of that 5 to 7 range, however they move it. Yeah. Those are the two problematic.
Just try to be done by 4.
Yeah, that's the big takeaway.
Yeah.
It's easy to change the timer.
Exactly.
So, Madam Chair, just to clarify, is the board asking to have that voluntary message changed to avoid 5 to 7 a.m. daily irrigation?
Correct.
I would say try to make it done by 4 because
By
that
4.
gives it a little more time to recover.
Right.
And our
That-
water
you-
I mean, there's a
That'd be-
combination of
Irrigation.
people get up in the morning and shower and use toilets and everything else, and then
Right
they're
around
all
the same
irrigated,
time.
so.
Steve, I'd ask if you could draft that
Try to finish irrigating
Statement?
by 4.
so that we could take a look and get it on the website.
Gladly,
Right.
I'll get something to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you very
This
much.
is really helpful, thank you. We've had a
Really
lot of
helpful.
questions on it, so thank you.
Affects a lot of people. Next, we have on the agenda, financial update and capital plan presentation. Jennifer Petit, Finance Director.
Good evening, everyone. So I have one line item on the agenda, 2 issues. And if you remember last year, I came before you, thank you very much, to give you a financial update really on our trust funds. They're invested in the long term. And so that was a part of your packet on Friday, what the returns were for the year, and also a copy of the local estimated receipts. And that is about, we estimate, in FY18, we estimate if you looked over the spreadsheet, about 19 million, and we brought in 27 million. So I'll start with the estimated receipts. It's really a look of how the economy is. It's made up of motor vehicle excise tax, your meals tax, it's ambulance revenue, beach revenue, a lot of that. We also brought in 2 million in special assessments, and really what that is are the betterments that we just billed this year for the Little Pond Source Service area. About 1.6 million were in betterments. And so we brought in, after you do the math, really, because we're going to reserve the betterment revenue to pay down the debt over time, we brought in about 6.5 million of actual receipts over estimated receipts. So we really, did have a good year. The investment trust fund, for the trust funds, the market, if you recall or pay attention to the news, this is just really a snapshot of 1 year. And if you want to look at the principal that we've invested since inception and where we're at right now, it's about a 12% return. And, we transfer money in every year, we transfer money out every year. And the market went down a little bit in, February, but it's recovered. And so we didn't gain as much as we normally would, but we only can invest in the legal list according to the state, so it's still, we're very restrictive of how we can invest our funds, but it's in for the long haul, and we have been getting, return on our investment. So
Great return.
Yeah, 12 is great on the safe.
Yes, since
safe bet.
inception. Yeah, not this year. What I gave you was a snapshot of this year, so I'm giving you, try to look at it a little bit differently. Finance, we can always look at things a little differently. So,
You make it entertaining.
thank you. So that was, so it was a good year for the trust funds. We were able to invest them in the long term, where a lot of our money's in cash. And with the increase in interest rates, we're getting a little bit more of a return on our cash, but again, not as much as we did probably back in 2004. So that's a little bit of a financial update. I'd like to inform the board. I don't know if y'all have any questions regarding.
Doug?
I'm just wondering if there's, with the prior year, we also were a good deal over our estimated. Should we be a little less conservative, maybe increase our estimated receipts for the next year?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. You bring up a really good point. Just so you know, this was FY18 that we've just ended June 30th. In FY19, we did increase our estimated receipts by $1 million.
Okay.
So we have been doing that. We've been adding a little bit of staff. As you recall, we added some positions in the fire department, building department, and we've increased our estimated receipts on the water side. We've increased our water rates, but we've also, with the water filtration plant, we needed to add some positions, and also for the wastewater department, we had to add some positions as well. So we've been able to try to keep up with that, and then again, when we do the FY 2020 budget, we'll look at it again. Right now, as everybody knows, building permits are up, motor vehicle excise is up, the economy is doing very well. You still want to be somewhat conservative because it will take a turn, and that's what happened, a few years back in 2009. And if you're really capping out your estimated receipts, you're restricted on that one-time revenue for some capital, and then you run into a problem of not being able to set your tax rate. This is probably maybe one of the first financial presentations I've given since we've had the AAA bond rating. So the way that the Board of Selectmen have been voting their policies, and we've been presenting budgets according to those policies, and we've been able to increase some things, not all at once, but as we can handle it. It's been a good process and procedure, if you will, in my estimation.
Because some of these receipts are annual receipts that we should expect at least to level and not to decrease.
Yeah, you know, it depends on how you are next year. I mean, when you think about it, this, you know, FY18 was a great year. It was better than FY17. How far can it keep going up? How many new vehicles can people keep buying? How many more beach stickers can we sell? It's going to level off at some point. And, you know, in this year that we're in, we've increased it $1 million, our estimated receipts. So what are we going to look at for FY20? And we're going to be talking about that in 4 or 5 short months. We'll be talking about FY20.
Great, thank you.
Any more questions on the financial update? No. Okay. Well, I wanted to start out the capital plan with, last year when we put the budget together and we presented it to the board, you know, it went well, town meeting went well, but when we presented the operating budget, there were a lot of questions on capital, and it even happened with the finance committee. Everybody was asking about capital. And so, you know, I like to look back and think of what worked and what didn't work through the public process. And one of the things I thought about is I need to spend a little bit more time on capital, and maybe on the bigger capital items, like the capital facility plan, projects that we might borrow for. So this year, I wanted to give an update on the capital facility plan and then talk a little bit about the 10-year capital plan. So I'm going to put a graph, I'm going to walk around a little bit, and bear with me. I know this is from our viewing audience, if you will. Okay, so do we have the red dot here?
It's a bar, that red bar.
Oh, there we go. All right, so there's a lot of information here. I want to put it in one graph, but let me walk you through it. So the capital facility plan is really our major capital projects that we will be borrowing for, that's excluded from Proposition 2.5. If you recall, in our financial policies, and we've been doing this for years, and we actually incorporated it into our policies a couple of years ago, is that we have what's called debt drop-off. We've been talking about that since the Peter Boyer days. And so as our principal and interest, we pay less every year from bonded projects, we want to incorporate new debt, and that really creates a window of opportunity of new projects without spiking the tax levy. So we always want, when we approach the next year, we want to increase the tax levy, the allowable 2.5%. And then that gives us that window. So I'm sorry this is cut off a little bit, but this is really 11 million. So right now, our bonded, we're paying principal and interest a little over $11 million. Now this time you're going to start seeing, and I'm trying to show the revenue. So this is the revenue that will drive this bar down, but this is a complicated graph with complicated formulas. And so this comes to a little bit over 10. And this revenue right now is what for FY18, if you recall, we used some debt stabilization monies. We use debt stabilization, and a lot of this has to do with the, and think about this, the $100 million in projects that was voted at town meeting in 2014. When we vote a project and it goes to the ballot, a lot of, you know, we all say, okay, great, that went through, that's perfect. And then we embark on the project, that takes a few years, and then the finances start to kick in as it's, you know, we pay principal and interest. So right now, we have paid principal and interest on about $80 million of that $100 million that we've approved. And that's oops. Oh, wait a minute, I gotta go back. And that's incorporated into the black line right here. And so we always want to pay about this amount every year to take advantage of that debt drop-off. This right here, the difference, and then you add in the revenue, it's only about $100,000, so it's not a huge debt drop-off. In 2022, what you're going to see is you're going to see some principal and interest for the senior center and the athletic field. Now, right now, those are approved projects, but we haven't borrowed for them yet because we haven't started constructing. So you'll probably see principal and interest payments in 2022. And so we use, and let me back up a little bit. So the revenue, we use debt stabilization for 2018 and 2019. So when we embarked on the $100 million, we had put money aside because we didn't know when with the water rates, it was up to the Board of Selectmen, and when the betterment revenue would come in. We couldn't bill for the betterments until the project was completed. So we needed to have a safety net, if you will, for when we started paying for these projects and not increase the tax rate. And so that's why you see that this debt stabilization money. And then we've started in 2020 is the first year that you're going to see some betterment revenue and some water revenue look to decrease the debt. And then you'll see that. And then here, we're going to use a little bit more debt stabilization because this will be the first year of principal and interest for the senior center. And so that's the plan going out. And then as you can tell, it really will drop off in 2024. And then going forward. So what I've incorporated into this plan is the athletic field that's already been voted. That's the one that just went to the ballot. Now, we're looking at some comprehensive wastewater management plan projects, and I think that's come to the board, conceptually a little bit. We're going to update our CWMP. I think it's due a year from December. And so we're looking at about another $60 million. So what I planned was $60 million with 70% of betterments. We're starting discussions on a fire station. So I have about $7 million in there for a fire station, and then the senior center. And also, and I started discussions with the school last year as we're looking for school roofs, probably about $6 million, $6.5 million. They need to replace some of the roofs on the school. So we need to start to incorporate that into our capital facility plan. So those are the major projects I've incorporated. And to offset a little bit, we're using the betterment revenue, some water revenue, some debt stabilization fund, and this is the existing debt. So you'll start to see a drop off in 2024. And so if you're looking at a major capital project that you're going to borrow for, I would probably say anything over $2 million that you want to go to the ballot, you can start planning for it now. If it goes to the ballot in 2020, you probably aren't going to, or 2021, you won't start paying principal and interest until like 2023 or 2024. So this plan is out. These are the things we're thinking about. So it gives something the board to think about other projects that people have discussed that they might want to do, and that's really the planning process. If there's anything that wants to be incorporated, I'd say in 2020 or 2021 with principal and interest, it's really a project that what would the board want to get behind for a tax increase?
And what would be the parameters in terms of what would be the limit, the money limit?
Of what you would borrow of a project?
In other words, how many projects can we squish into that debt drop-off?
Well, you'll have
60 million water.
Depends.
Yeah, I would say in 2024, we have in debt drop-off probably a room of $1.3 million, and that's $1.3 million of principal and interest. So it would depend on what the project would be and the interest rates at that time. I usually use a 4% interest rate. It's a good question, but it's something I'd probably have to calculate. Wouldn't take too long.
Where do the turbines
Actually,
fit?
Peter has his phone out right now, and I can see that he's probably going to throw out a number.
Turbines, where do the turbines fit?
So the turbines aren't in here, and you bring up a good question, because we've been discussing that. But there's still so much of the unknowns that you look at. We have a good free cash. When we borrow, this is all borrowed money. So when you borrow money, it has to be for an asset. So it depends on what the decision is on the turbines.
But Wind 1 is an existing debt.
And Wind 1 is
Your
in here.
indebtedness on Wind 1 is in there.
Right.
It's
But
the future debt that's unknown.
Right, so anything that we're gonna pay, we'd have to look at it. What is it? What is the plan? I wouldn't put that in there because I'm not quite sure what the plan is.
But you've accounted, I think, just to clarify what Julian is saying, you've accounted for the existing, our current debt obligation
absolutely.
is in that. So this is what it looks like until we make some kind of decision as to what's going to happen with the turbines.
Exactly, right.
So this is a status quo.
Right.
Sam?
Yeah, what I'm not seeing in any of your budget figures is expansion of our wastewater treatment. I mean, we know we're talking about this flow neutral issue, and we have to worry about reaching a discharge limit capacity. And I don't see any thoughts about projecting out as to what we're going to be doing there. That's one of the areas. Let me just go through the ones that are bothering me.
Okay, let me write them down, and then I can, do you want me to respond to them one by one?
Yeah, go
or-
for it. Yeah, that's
Okay,
fine.
all right. So the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant, is that part, if, I would assume that would be part of the comprehensive wastewater management plan as you're expanding the source system. Is that correct?
Yes, except that this whole business of the limit that we have on our discharge capacity is kind of a set number, and it's not, I mean, we're already pushing up to the point where, you know, I don't know what the average daily flow is, but we're moving up toward that 80%, and then we got to be prepared when the 100% is reached, and then we can no longer
Okay.
sewer anybody or hook up any more businesses or what have you, or any.
So let me just explain how I came up, oops, I did it again. How I came up with this is I send out a memo to all the department heads and ask them for their capital plan and their capital facility plan. And then they let me know. It's through all conversations. Unless someone told me you need to put in money for an expansion of the wastewater system, that's why it's not there.
And who
I would
is that
assume-
you you're talking to?
And I would
didn't get the memo.
I would assume that it
That's
would
my
be-
problem.
I would assume that it was part of the CWMP projects. I mean, I have been discussing, you know, with Virginia and Eric about that, so.
But those are civilians, right? They're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
staff.
I'm just letting you know
Yeah.
how I came up with this. And
Okay, yeah,
if I
okay.
get a number and you want to give me, if I get the number, I can definitely incorporate that. In the timing of it, I'd have to have a meeting with
Yeah, I
them, and
understand.
then I'll incorporate it for you, absolutely.
But Mike,
Oh,
can I
sorry.
just cap this off? I'm just concerned, I just came from that One Cape Summit for 2 days.
Okay.
And you look at the demands that the town is gonna have to be addressing. An awful lot of those demands, I don't see projected out in this. And I don't know who's gonna be taking the responsibility to really ask those questions and come up with some kind of an estimate on what it's gonna cost us to really go out 10 years for sewage treatment, for instance. What about the affordable housing issues, which are huge and are getting worse? And then we also have issues of, you know, communication infrastructure. We're already running into limits on what the private world is providing us with in the way of internet traffic. We have this huge open Cape system, but we can't afford to connect to it at this point. So I'm concerned that we're using a sort of a 19th century infrastructure perspective when we're already well into the 21st century, and we're not looking at the kinds of infrastructure that we need to provide to this town to make sure we remain economically, culturally, and, you know, socially vibrant, you know.
Well, if, you know, I'll defer to the town manager if the board wants to have a meeting of what they want to see in this plan that I don't have, then we can try to incorporate it.
You know, that's a very good point, because we just came from the outreach meeting at, that was had at East Falmouth. And so I think you know, the conversation is going in that direction, and it informs the board, and those are a little bit different issues than your presentation, but they're not unrelated. And the next outreach, I think, the Dougs are going to chair. So this will inform, you know, some of their organization on the next outreach. Megan? Did you? Okay.
I was going to just say, didn't I hear you say that you were projecting about $60 million for?
For the comprehensive wastewater management plan,
Right,
yes.
that's a pretty good placeholder without a plan. So, I mean.
Agreed.
Well, and then I didn't mention the whole coastal resiliency, the infrastructure resiliency through storm damage, which I know we got some money put in there for 5 years, but I guess we haven't gotten anything tangible yet that we need to begin to plan for in the way of improvements
Not
that we need to
exactly,
make.
right.
But
And
that's another thing that I think is
Right.
going to fill in out there that.
Well, this is just this is the capital facility plan. This is what we will borrow for, that's excluded from Proposition 2.5 that will go to the ballot for an asset. You can't borrow for something that's not an asset, like a service. So you can't borrow for coastal resiliency thinking of what might happen in the future. So it wouldn't go in this plan.
Oh,
So
no,
you
I
want to make
understand.
sure you have enough reserves. So really, you know, this is what I did it again.
I understand what
This
you're
is
saying,
what we
but
know now.
I think there are projects that will be capital improvements. And I think those are the things I think we need to start filling in on this, so we have a better sense of what the needs is and what the revenues are going to be required in order to be able to pay
Yeah,
for it.
and you'll have a
The nice thing is we
good-
have space.
And you have good drop-off in
Mathematician
2024.
says.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think, you know, sort of visualizing it, I think helps us to then see where we might add in some of these other, if we have a choice. Some things, you know, we may not have a choice as to when, if emergencies arise around some of our, you know, infrastructure in terms of coastal resiliency, those timelines might move forward or whatever it might be. But I think this is a nice way to kind of visualize where we are and how things are paid for and where some of that debt drops down. I would say that I think what the point that Sam is raising brings us back to something that we've talked about before, which is going back and looking at a capital plan, having some more conversation about it, looking at, you know, since we're talking about the flow neutral bylaw a lot and we're looking at this maybe happening a little sooner, reevaluating some of those things or fleshing them out and getting some more, you know, clarity on what some of those numbers might be. So I think it just brings to the forefront that this board needs to kind of do that work a little bit as well. But I think this does really inform that conversation as we go forward.
Absolutely. Doug?
That's exactly what I was just going to say. If we want to add to the wish list of things that we see coming that are not department head responsibilities, then we can certainly do that. Now's our chance.
Madam Chair?
Please.
If you like, I can just add some perspective. So the answer to your question, what does $1.3 million buy us? At 30 years and an interest rate of 4%, it buys us about $17 million. Now, if we were to go to a more aggressive borrowing schedule, 20 years, then that goes down to $13 million.
Okay. So 17 million, approximately 17 million worth of
projects
in that.
If you borrow it long-term, 30 years.
30-year
Right,
term.
for 30 years.
And if we get them on sale?
Well, if you act today only.
Jennifer?
So at least this will let you know when you do have that. And as you can see, we're using revenue to reduce that and to keep that levy steady. So this hopefully will help in your planning process with
Very,
your
very
major
helpful.
capital projects.
Very good.
You can tell it started a lively conversation.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's why I'm here.
Appreciate it.
And so then I'll jump into were there any more questions on the capital facility?
One more specific, because
Sure.
I think it's eminent on this, and this is the whole stormwater management, and I see Peter McConnery's here, and we're gonna have some requirements kicking in the 1st of October. I know it's an item I asked to be on our agenda to give us a report on where we are, but I didn't know whether any of those capital projects are gonna have been put into this projection.
Not into this, but it's in the capital plan. We also have a 10-year capital plan, and there is some money for some stormwater. What you're talking about is the new regulations. That's not in this plan. This is just for major capital projects that we're borrowing for, probably over $2 million, depending on what that may be and you know, where we're at. And again, let me emphasize, this is a plan, and plans can be changed. So when I came in front of the board in 2014 with the $100 million in projects, I had a plan, and I had to change that plan because we started borrowing money from different sources. And, you know, if the market's really doing well and we're going to get a low interest rate, then we might want to borrow. So we're always monitoring this, but this is just a plan as a guideline for everybody to take a look at.
Thank you.
Okay. So then I'll bring you to the 10-year capital plan. And every year, we send out memos to all the department heads asking for all their capital items to update the 10-year plan. When we look at the 10-year plan, there's a couple things we look at. We look at what's been on the plan for a while. What haven't we been able to get to? We look at the aging infrastructure, and we try to make headway on that. If somebody comes with an item in the capital plan that's never been there before, and they absolutely need it that year, we probably won't prioritize it because we need to get to everybody, and we need to work with every department, and every department has a need. And so when we look at the capital plan, we do look at spreading it out, if you will. And so let me just, the capital plan is presented at the annual November town meeting. And again, it's use of one-time revenues to fund one-time expenses. So the majority of the capital plan is the use of free cash. This year we're recommending using about $8.3 million in free cash. Last year we used, I think it was approximately $6 million, a little bit less. This year we do have a rollover of free cash of about $5 million. We haven't had our free cash certified yet. But I do want to mention, and I'll mention it a couple times because I don't want to forget about it, although it is in the spreadsheet, that we are looking at a major water main replacement on Main Street, and that price tag is $7.6 million. And so we're looking at using approximately And might adjust this once we get our free cash certified, approximately $5 million for that in free cash, and then borrow the $2.5 million, not to put the huge pressure. We'll have to look at the water rates and an increase in the water rates, but we don't want to put huge pressure of a borrowing of $7.6 million, especially where the water and the increased revenue from water rates has been flowing into our free cash. So we want to actually earmark that for water projects. The requests are submitted by department heads and reviewed by the finance director, the assistant town manager, and the town manager. The town manager makes recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and then the selectmen approves it and then sends it on to the finance committee, who reviews the request and makes recommendations at town meeting. So along with the 10-year plan that was part of your packet, we gave you detailed sheets. Now, you'll only get detailed sheets on what the recommendation is from the town manager. There is a lot of information there. We tried to pay special attention to give you a lot of detail on what we're recommending for funding. We have a use of a capital stabilization fund. We're recommending about $1.5 million, and that's for a ladder truck. And we have some reallocated older capital articles in the $8.3 million use of free cash. And then $1 million is allocated to the school department. We've been working very well with the school department. We've been meeting with the new superintendent and the business manager, and they've come up with a 10-year plan. Although they're a little short of the 10, it's hard to go out 10 years. A lot of communities do 5. So they have some outer years, and they've given some thought to that. So we've been able to fund the school department, and we've been working very well with them. So the initiatives this year, the biggest initiative I think you'll see is the equipment replacement. The fire department, we've been trying to catch up with them, as you know, for the last few years. So this year you will see 2 ambulances and a fire engine. Really, it's a ladder truck. And with that, next year you'll see a replacement probably for just an ambulance. You won't need an additional fire engine, and then we can put that in the out year. And really what this plan does, it starts putting us on track for maintenance, and we're not trying to play catch up. It's taken a few years to play catch up. We're looking at 2 dump trucks. We have a 6-wheel dump truck that we're going to trade in and get well, actually, we're going to transfer that over to the golf course. But we're going to, no, we're not. That's another dump truck. We have a lot of equipment replacement. We have a 6-wheel dump truck that we're going to trade in for a 10-wheel. And what that will allow us to do is the snow and ice will allow us to stay out longer with sand. And when we have the inclement weather and they're not coming back. So it's a better service to the community. We're asking for an additional trash compactor, and what will happen, that will enable the community or the employees to stay out longer. You'll have 1 employee on a trash compactor, and they'll be able to stay out longer in order to pick, especially in the summer months, and pick up the trash, and you won't have to do it in pickup trucks with 2 people. I mean, you still will a little bit, but not as much, and it will save some overtime. So we're looking at some equipment that will actually be an efficiency with employees. We're looking for some parks equipment, and you'll see some vehicle replacement, and actually there's a boat replacement also on there for the Marine and Environmental Services. So we feel that we're really making a good dent in the equipment, and next year we can be more on a maintenance plan. It won't be such a hit. Also, what we're looking at is water projects. We have over $1 million in water projects. The Top Gun conversion, Sam, as you alluded to earlier, we have some IT infrastructure that we have to deal with, and we don't talk about this a lot. But Top Gun, which is a program that they did a fabulous job, and we were so far ahead of the curve with our prior IT department, and we had programmers upstairs that were actually able to program this, but it's in COBOL, and that's obsolete. We need to get off of Top Gun, and what we're finding is the ins and outs of Top Gun, the programming is in like every single program, so it's not as simple as, oh, let's, for the mooring bills, let's just get off Top Gun and we'll use another software. So we're finding some issues there, so we have some money in for some Top Gun conversion software. The biggest one is utility billing. IT infrastructure upgrade. We've had some issues with our virtual servers, so we have a plan. If you read your backup to, it's like a little over $200,000 for some infrastructure upgrades there. We have money in there, as you alluded to before, for some coastal resiliency money. That is an issue. We recognize that coastal erosion is a major issue. We need to look at how we want to fund it, how we're going to fund it, how much money can we put towards it without, we have Minot Beach, we have Chappaquiddick Road. We need to keep up with this. but how do we do that? And it's really about planning and discussing it. So I was glad that you all discussed that earlier. But the more we can pay cash for, the better we're off we are, really. And so we do have some good reserves. So we have coastal resiliency money in there. Also with Chappaquiddick Road, it was a 3-phase project. $500,000 the first year. We allocated that last year. When I sat down with the DPW department, they just got through the design and permitting and they just went out to bid. So they'll start the construction for that. However, for phase 2, they have to go through the design and permitting again. So you'll see some money in there for the design and permitting for Chappaquiddick Road and Minot. You won't see construction money until next year. We don't want to appropriate that now and then just have it sit there. We want to put the money to good use. We have road maintenance money. The highway department has been doing a fabulous job keeping up with the roads, and we want to continue that. In wastewater equipment, as you've said before, it came up this year. It was on the 10-year plan for last year. We'll fund the wastewater equipment. In field maintenance, we definitely recognize that that's an issue, and we're doing everything we can right now for putting our money. When we put the capital plan together, and the town manager and assistant town manager and I discussed this, we recognize that we need to put money towards certain things, but we also recognize that we need to have, we need to be able to implement that. Sometimes it's not just a money issue, it's how you're going to move things around. So in conclusion, this comprehensive presentation on all capital items, it was in your, we'll put this on the website tomorrow now that the board has had a chance to take a look at it. We'll continue to make progress funding these large capital items. We're looking at them more and more every day. And this plan really does help us maintain that vehicle replacement program and get into that. And one thing I do want to say is that we've hired a fleet manager, and he's really looking at that. And we're purchasing some software, which we really didn't have before. And so we can look at the software when this vehicle is up for this type of maintenance and really keep track of our inventory and when we need to replace that. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Doug?
He's first. I think he.
Just as I looked over the 10-year plan, just for Sam's sake, I do see there's a $60 million line item in 2025 for a new wastewater treatment plant.
Right.
Yeah, I think
it just is not in, it was not in her 25-year plan, but it is within the next 5 years.
Yeah, I see that, but I'm not sure that the scope of it is accurate.
Right, well, I'm sure it's complete guesswork because
I think that number comes as a result of looking at how much more sewering we want to put into collection. Don't think it's answering the discharge question.
Right, because I mean, that one's just such guesswork. Who knows how we're going to do it? I've talked to some people about whether we can convince Huey to put a treatment plant down in Woods Hole and use the outfall system again, which may be the way we have to go. I know it's I'm saying to a lot of people here outfall, but
people like John Waterbury are asking these questions, but I just don't feel like we've started putting something into a plan that we can have any assurance will ever happen. Yeah. And it bothers me that it's all so ambiguous, and yet it's going to be such an constraint. Okay. And that's my...
Doug and then Megan?
On a more immediate question, I'm really curious to know, Public Works request was for $10,687,000, and the proposed is $4,892,000. What was the big ticket items that we're not doing? And Peter McConerty might know.
So it's part of the proposed, let me take a quick look at this.
Megan, did you have a comment while she's looking?
No, well, I guess just to Doug and to Sam's point, I think that's what Amy has told us she's already kind of starting to do and is going to, get back to this board about as she explores that, sort of that process and what that might look like. I share Sam's frustration in that part of it is slightly out of our control in that, those decisions about what's going to be required of us are not just up for us to make. And so the guesswork isn't just about cost, but it's what's even going to be available to us as options and allowed. So it's a tough thing to certainly plan for, but somehow to keep that placeholder in there, I think is important. But.
And from my perspective, just to touch on that a little bit, is when we send out the the memos to everybody, and they update it they update it in the out years, and the 60 million really, it's about the same time frame as you have the 60 million for the comprehensive wastewater management plan, and it all kind of, so we really do need to weigh out the details, because then, as you see, if you're looking at voting it in 2025, then you're not looking at even starting to pay principal and interest until 2028.
Right.
And so something that far out, you really need to discuss how you're going to fund that. Is it a new treatment? Is it an expansion, or is it new? And getting the information on that. Back to Doug's question, there was a request for 1.8 million for the tech park painting from the water department. Now, I had a conversation with Steve Rafferty, and we've had a couple of issues that we're just not ready to do that, so he was fine with me putting it into an out year.
When you say tech park painting, do you mean water tower?
Yeah, the water tower, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why I said tech park painting, but it is that water tower.
It's the water tower.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's what
It
he,
is the
yeah, he
tank.
had
Is
it
it
in
the
there. as
inside or
tech
the
park
outside?
Tank painting.
There's 2 tanks up there. One is
Oh, there you
low
go.
service.
You need the mic, sorry, Steve.
Very, very quickly. There are 2 tanks at Tech Park. By the way, I am still Steve Rafferty. I'm still the water superintendent. There's 2 tanks up there. There's one to the lower service and the elevated tank that you see all the time. The lower tank needs to be painted inside and outside. And so, but we can defer it out for another year. It's tied in a little bit with, if we take that tank offline, it will only exacerbate our pressure problems right now. So we need to figure out how to take that tank offline for an extended period to paint it or do something around it. So we're not really ready to paint it right now. Even though we know what we want to do to paint it, we've got to come up with a construction plan that will actually allow us to do it.
And
Thank you for the
what about the other
explanation.
5 million? Any ideas?
Yeah, yes, 2.2 million was for coastal erosion, and I left it on there, and just so you know, when the request, I do speak with the department head, and that 2.2 was actually the construction for Minot Road and some construction for Chappaquoit Road. But after discussing it with DPW and the department heads, they're only ready really to do the design and permitting. If we were to appropriate that money right now, it would just sit there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
That
2.2
was part of the
million.
explanation.
So that's a
And the
good
lift-
4
lift-
million right there.
And the lift stations?
Right.
And then the lift stations, that's an ongoing discussion that I'm having with Amy Lowell, and, with vacations and everything, I'm actually going to discuss that with her this week. I left it in there. It probably won't become part of this plan, but it is part of the comprehensive wastewater management plan, and I think we might already have funding for that, but I just wanted to leave that in there, and I have to just sew up that conversation with Amy, and I didn't want to delay this presentation regarding that.
I just want to, it's incredibly helpful to have this presentation now, because what we've been saying, the board, over the past couple of years, is wouldn't it be great if we could start talking about these things a little bit earlier, so folks have a chance, town meeting members, to really understand what's happening. And now the packet comes to folks, in their homes on Friday, like with us. Thank you, Mark. And, it just gets people thinking and more prepared when town meeting comes in. And it also assists in the, the understanding of the department heads' contributions and how that works through the system, and, how, it's like your own family budget in a way. You might, ask for something one year and it doesn't get forgotten, it gets caught up when it can. Doug?
And I really like the way this is presented, and, with the pictures of the equipment and the description of the failing equipment that's being replaced. It's very well done. The only thing I would ask is that the stuff that's not being budgeted, just put a note somewhere, the list of what was requested and what's not, and what the reason is for that, because you're going to get these same questions that I'm asking.
Yeah, no problem.
Megan?
Thank you.
Just to say that I hope that people take advantage of the fact that, we're looking at this now, and so people have questions that they can get in touch with us. I mean, that's part of this process, is for them to give us feedback, to really ask those tough questions, or say, I went and I looked through it because it's available, and, I really think we should go in this direction. I mean, the whole point of this presentation and the whole point of this being available is not just for this board, obviously, but more, really more importantly, for people in town to take a look at this and see if this is the way that they believe we should be going, because at the end of the day, it's, their money that funds this. So I think it's really helpful for it to be presented like this and this early and this fully.
Yeah, usually we present it in September, so it does give, and it'll
Gives a
give the
little bit more
finance
time.
committee, as soon as you approve it, I mean, I'll give the finance committee a copy, but as soon as you approve it, if you will, or send it on to the finance committee, they'll start discussing it and meeting with department heads and making their own recommendations. So they'll do their own thorough review, and this does give them time to do that.
And then, I was going to say the same thing there. We want to thank the members from the Finance Committee who came tonight. Really appreciate everything you do behind the scenes. It's a hugely important committee, obviously, and folks at home should know that, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 members of the Finance Committee are here tonight.
To get it later, they wanted to get the preview tonight.
Exactly, get it hot off the press. Doug?
There's still a few more million, I'm curious. I don't know if you have really had the list, or
Well,
should we ask?
that was about 4 or 5 million. So, and they asked for 10, and we're funding 4.8. So the other ones are just little things. I mean, smaller amounts. If you want, I can go through the list.
Well, I don't know, I don't want to be tedious, but
No, that's
I'm just
okay.
curious if, because we're always talking about how we need to fund the DPW more and how much work they have to do. I'm just curious if there's any kind of mission-critical stuff. These items certainly make sense to me, but...
There's, and one of the other things that we look at is when we review a capital plan, is I look and see what was funded in the previous year or the last couple years in that department, and if they haven't got to their projects yet, then we don't want to recommend funding for their projects because they're not going to get to them now. And so with the facilities department, there's been some projects they're still working on. So we did fund that, some roofs and that, but they did ask for $45,000 for the DPW HVAC, but we decided to put that off for another year because they haven't really been getting to some of their
The other
projects.
two, I guess, bridge maintenance was 100,000?
Yeah, and the other thing, and it's a great questions, because, so the bridge maintenance, the other thing I look at, again, is we fund that every year, and they have probably 2 years of funding that they haven't used yet. So we can still, they put that in there to let everybody know we need that. I could have probably changed that request, because we did have a conversation, Peter McConerty and I did, but they do have a couple $100,000 already on the book, so they have ample funding for the next year.
All right, so without going into detail, we're not denying them
No.
lawn mowers or employees or anything like
Yeah, no,
that?
I didn't mean to look at it like
Okay.
that, but no.
Okay.
Just remember, the employees would be, it would be in a different, excuse me, it'd be in operating. So
Okay, right.
I know some of the concerns that we really heard at the listening session were more around some of those issues of staffing, which
Mhm.
we'll obviously look at when we, when we take a look at the operating
Right.
budget.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's okay for now then.
And just so you know, the rivers and pond maintenance, they asked for $400,000, but through discussions, we'll probably put that off, but we have some ample funding right now, and we're waiting for the cost estimates to come in. And I just want to reiterate, I did hear about the listening session, and we'll talk a lot about that in the operating budget, because again, it's reoccurring revenue for reoccurring expenses. And this is, just one-time capital items. So that's really, some other smaller items that were asked for, but it's not a surprise to any of the department heads if we feel we're not recommending it, then we let them know why, or we have a discussion. And one of the things that I really think about, because it is somewhat of a political process, is that what do I leave of what they asked for as the proposed? And I really try to leave what their request is in there, even if we've come to some agreement or found other funds, and not change the request, because it is a need.
Right.
And we all want to know what the needs are, and that's kind of a fine line that I look at.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just say one other thing, Sue?
Please.
And then just for folks, I know everyone here knows this, but for folks at home who may not know, I mean, that's really part of the role of Finance Committee, is to then go back to those departments and, have a conversation. And it's another opportunity for that department head to really explain what their needs are. And if there's a place where there's disagreement, I mean, the Finance Committee has no problem really saying back to the Board of Selectmen, back, to you, we don't think this is the right number for this reason. And that's kind of that other separate checks and balance that the Finance Committee plays. It's a really important role in creating this budget and making sure that it's responsive to the needs of the town. So it's, from here, it still has a whole nother
Exactly.
life that it's going to take on.
And they
so.
make changes.
Yes.
And then it's early in the process, and then I might, once it goes to the Finance Committee, they're looking at it, we might request changes. So yeah, it's a fluid process.
Okay,
It's a much
thanks.
more efficient process if it happens at the Finance Committee than it happens at town meeting.
Yes.
Right.
And so if there are increases that need to happen, I really hope that happens through the Finance Committees. discussion,
Mhm.
not on town meeting floor. We say, well, actually, we should get 2 more fire trucks.
Right.
No.
Right, yeah.
Let the finance committee deal with it.
Give everybody a raise.
Again, that's operating.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you very much. So do
Great
you need an
presentation.
actual, do you need any vote from us on this?
Well, if you don't mind recommending that the finance committee starts reviewing it, but again,
Oh, for
it's
sure.
early
Oh.
on in the process, it's fluid, and then they can start their work when they're ready. if
Certainly,
That's okay.
I'd be happy with that.
Sure. Is there a motion to recommend?
I would move that we recommend this for review by the Finance Committee.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Finance Committee members. Next, we have on the agenda a discussion on medical marijuana host community agreement. Mr. Suso, would you tee that up, and then we'll have town council and the police chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, I'm just sending the board's way copies of a summary which has been prepared. As the board may recall, some time ago you authorized me to work with a potential provider of medical marijuana in the town on the concept of a host community agreement. And I've been working with Town Council Frank Duffy and Police Chief Edward Dunn and a potential provider. We have had at least one transition occur in terms of the potential provider. But if I may, I'd like to just walk through the concept of the proposed host community agreement. The board has also received a copy of an email from a representative of Nature's Remedy, with whom we have been having these discussions and negotiations, not totally concluded as yet. That's why what I'm providing you is a summary draft at this point, but there's also a projection of potential revenue. And again, I want to stress that this involves medical marijuana only, not recreational marijuana in any way, shape, or form, as this was a decision determined by a town-wide vote. There are no recreational marijuana sales within the town of Falmouth at all. This is only medical marijuana for those who receive the proper prescription from a licensed doctor, and that they would be filling that prescription in terms of their job. So this proposed host community agreement, and I welcome Frank or Ed joining me with comments as well, would involve the town of Falmouth and Nature's Remedy of Massachusetts, Inc. Nature's Remedy would locate a state-registered marijuana dispensary, or RMD as it is called in the acronym of the state, a medical dispensing facility not involving cultivation and not involving processing of marijuana, only medical dispensing strictly, in accordance with regulations issued by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Public Health. Should Nature's Remedy receive such approval from the State Department of Public Health and receive all required permits and approvals, a community host agreement will set the general terms and conditions. Pursuant to this, Nature's Remedy recognizes that its operation may impact the following town departments, services, and resources, those being police, fire and rescue, human services, public works, water, wastewater, inspectional services, and the school department. Nature's Remedy, under a draft, this draft agreement, would pay to the town 3% of gross sales revenue during the first year of operation, suggested payments to be made on a quarterly basis. That 3% is the statutory maximum that is allowed by the legislation. In the second through the fifth years of operation, payments would be maintained to the town at this same 3% of gross sales revenue. The purpose of the community benefit payment is to assist the town in addressing any public health, safety, and other potential impacts of the registered marijuana dispensary facility may have on the town. Nature's Remedy would agree to provide staff to participate in town-sponsored educational programs on public health and drug abuse prevention, and to work cooperatively with the town public safety departments and the school department. As per applicable state regulations, the selectmen will be asked to consider issuing a letter of either non-opposition or a letter of support for the Nature's Remedy facility. The proposed location of 31 T-Ticket Highway is within an area permitted by the B2 zoning code classification currently in place. And if that would be, if the Board of Selectmen would be so willing, we would come to you at a future meeting with a representative of Nature's Remedy to inquire as to your willingness to provide either a letter of non-opposition or alternatively a letter of support at that future meeting to allow the next steps to take place.
Thank you. Chief Dunn, could you come up and just give us an overview of your view? Megan, did you have a question for the town manager?
No, as he's coming up, I just had one. I had probably maybe a half dozen folks approach me at the listening session about location. So just if we put it, I know we've just noted it now as 31 T-Ticket Highway. If however if we move forward and this is on a future agenda, if we can make sure that we list that proposed address, because, you know, I had a number of individuals just inquire, and I'm sure the people who live in that vicinity were looking for that, so.
It's a great idea.
To know.
Certainly.
We'll put it on the agenda if it comes up. Chief Dunn, welcome.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me. As the town manager says, I've worked with the town manager and Frank Duffy to come up with this host agreement and looked at several host agreements throughout the Commonwealth. I've also just today spoke with a couple of police chiefs that currently have medical marijuana facilities in their communities. One in Mashpee, one in Plymouth, and one in Cambridge. I just did a random selection and spoke with them. I'm happy to report that each of them said that they have had no law enforcement problems with those dispensaries in their communities. So.
Thank you. Does Nature's Remedy operate other facilities?
The conversations I've had with them, they're in the process, I believe, of trying to get some other facilities up and running. They also have a grow operation, I believe, in another part of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
I think I'm ready to consider it.
So then I just want to clarify that after year 5, that we're not getting any further revenue.
After year 5, the agreement would be renegotiated for future years. We're limited to 5 years, by my memory. I think town council has confirmed that, so that we'd be coming back to the board and working with the provider, if this goes forward successfully, for a successor agreement.
Frank, did you come up for a question or two if it comes up? Go ahead,
Can I ask a
Megan.
question just as to
Please.
that? So just to clarify, so if we have the 5-year agreement and Nature's Remedy sets up shop and they're running their business for 5 years and we go back to renegotiate, what sort of leverage do we have to negotiate some terms that are favorable to the town if they already have a business and there haven't been any, I mean, does their license expire in 5 years? Is that?
No, the license does not expire.
Right.
So they will continue to sell marijuana, medical marijuana. Now, under the enabling legislation, which is part of Chapter 94G, Section 3D of the Massachusetts General Laws, when we started negotiating, or when the town manager started negotiating with the old company, which was called 7 Point, there were no restrictions in the law. But then there was a switch. 7 Point left. Nature's Remedy came in. I don't know why they changed, but that's probably not really our concern right now. But in the meantime, the legislature has passed a law that changed the terms and conditions of a community host agreement. So the current restraints are that a community impact fee must, 1, be reasonably related to costs, which means we can't really guess. We have to have some backup to support the cost. And that the community impact fee shall not amount to more than 3% of gross sales or be effective for longer than 5 years. So at the end of 5 years, I don't know what we'll be able to negotiate, but it may not be continued financial contributions. It may be other important issues.
And by that time, we'll know if there's any impacts and any costs, and if there are, then we'll make that point, right?
With what leverage?
Frank, does the agreement provide any Guys, one at a time. Frank, does the agreement provide for any kind of automatic conversion to recreational marijuana sales?
No, it does not. In fact, as Mr. Suso has pointed out, we have a bylaw that limits our community to the sale of medical marijuana. The sale of recreational marijuana and its processing and its growing and so forth is not permitted in Massachusetts, in Falmouth, rather. We also did that two ways. We did it through a general bylaw and we did it through a zoning bylaw. So it does not provide that. There is a provision in this agreement, and by the way, as the chief suggested, we went and we gathered host community agreements from a number of communities, and we tried to pick some of the good points. And one of them was that if, in fact, there is a change of law that allows recreational marijuana despite our bylaw, then we have a right to reopen the agreement and renegotiate it. I don't know if we'll ever get there.
Thank you.
Just
Doug.
a couple of other points, though, that
Sure.
Mr. Suso didn't mention, I think might be worthwhile mentioning to the public. We do have a provision in our draft community host agreement that they will hire local people, that they will buy products from local vendors, and that all the property they have will be subject to real estate and personal property tax. So we'll get some revenue from that stream, too.
Great, Doug?
Did the law change as to whether they have to have one of these letters to be approved or not? Because
No.
I think 2 years ago, it was a little unclear as to whether that they could open even without this.
It says that the way I read it, it says there shall be well, it just says that within the host community, the host community agreement shall include, but not be limited to, all stipulations which shall include, but not limited to, responsibilities of the host community and of the marijuana establishment. So it's your one opportunity to memorialize what the responsibilities of the party are, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary that there be one.
No, my question is, does there have to be a letter from the Board of Selectmen?
Yes, that has not changed.
Because originally when the law was written, it was a little unclear whether it just, I think when it originally had, if they had that letter, they moved up the list of potential places to open. It didn't mean that you had to have it. And that it.
If they don't have a letter, they still can get their permit at the end of the day, yes.
They still can, so they
Yeah.
don't need this letter from us. They may be able to open this without this letter. They may be able to open with no letter and no host agreement. So if we have any chance of getting a host agreement, we need to give those.
This is it, yes.
Yeah, this is it.
Yeah.
Correct.
Any other questions? Thank you, Frank. Is the board ready to act on the question of non-opposition or letter of support?
Is that where we are? I thought we were now at the,
Well, if it's agreeable, I would come back on the agenda with your concurrence, Madam Chair, with the concept of either a letter of non-opposition or support. That would be the item on your agenda for this particular location.
Right.
And we can ask a representative of Nature's Remedy to join us if you would have any questions at that time as well.
I would prefer, I think that that's where we're at in the process, and I really do think.
Interview the.
Yes, and for the agenda to represent what, a broader discussion. The way it was agenda is a review of this proposed, agreement, not sort of the whole concept of the location and everything else. I'd want the public to have an opportunity.
Give more time.
Yeah, to speak in favor or in opposition to the concept of it.
what I would think might be fair for the Nature's Remedy is I'd be willing to vote support of this this draft host community agreement so they know how the board feels about it. It'd be, if we were all against this host community agreement, it would be fair for them to know that before they showed up.
I think I prefer a specific agenda question, even though I kind of felt the same way going forward. There seemed to be momentum by the board. But
I'm saying I would not vote the letter, but I'm just saying voting the concepts of this host community agreement. I think we could vote that approval.
I'm not trying to be nitpicky, but if it just says discussion
That's my
on
thought.
the agenda, that's my only concern, is that folks didn't know that we were necessarily going to vote on supporting it. I understand what Doug is saying, but I think that Nature's Remedy probably still has enough incentive to wait for the next time it's on to come and speak to us, because that's what we'd be asking them to do, to really look at having Julian draft a letter.
Could I just clarify perhaps with town council? My understanding has always been that the term discussion on an agenda includes the concept of a vote from the
It
board.
usually does,
if you
yes.
so choose.
I think
It doesn't exclude
it's
the
more
vote.
about the public having an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
and to have a sense that the board has a full interview. Doug?
I would just say that I wouldn't mind voicing my opinion that I'm sort of ready for this. I think last time we discussed it, the state wasn't ready, and I think this time we're a little more prepared. And as we just mentioned, this is our time to make this negotiation. So, I mean, I think it's favorable. That's my opinion.
So it's stated, don't necessarily have to vote it.
Yeah.
Sam?
No, I would just like to see a draft of that letter and have it published, we now put our documents out early on Monday morning, so if citizens want to look it up online, they could come and comment on the draft letter
I
itself.
think we'd take town council's advice on whether that would make sense, but I
So
certainly get the idea. Doug?
So the letter itself, I'm not at all ready to vote on because I haven't seen the letter. I'm just talking about the draft host community agreement that I'm ready to move. I'll make a motion that this board votes that we are in support of the concepts of the host community agreement, not the letter of support of opposition, not Nature's Remedy, but as a draft of a host community agreement with a medical marijuana facility. This fits the bill for me.
Okay.
But we don't have any choice in the matter.
So
I think that's why he's putting the motion forward.
So I'll second it.
I think that's what Doug stated earlier, is that this is our opportunity to, have a benefit come out of this, given that the process can still go forward, although we don't know how much more cumbersome it is for, a company, or how much longer it is without the support of the town, but the statute doesn't disallow their continuance of that process.
So I guess the motion is that on the next agenda, we would put a vote for a letter of either non-opposition or a letter of support for Nature's Remedy facility. Does that sum it up?
I'm not sure if they're going to be ready in time to come back at our next meeting.
For a future meeting.
In a future meeting.
Future meeting.
Does
Right,
that sum
and
up
I'd like-
your thought?
And I'd want Nature's Remedy to come and hear their proposal, and I'd want, as Megan said, I want it on the agenda listing what the location is. And I didn't want to hear the presentation. I'm not sure I'd be ready to vote after the presentation either. It may be one that we'd want to hear the presentation, let the public hear it, continue our vote until the meeting after that. But again, I'm not even on that discussion. It's just the argument on this community agreement seems like a good
Okay.
framework for a community agreement.
Okay, so that's your motion, is your motion that you just made, that Doug seconded, was to support this concept of this community draft agreement?
Yep.
Okay, and Doug seconded.
Right.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Good.
Thank you.
thank you.
Next, annual committee reappointments.
Parking clerks?
Parking clerk
An assistant parking clerk?
and assistant parking clerk. So I would move appointment of parking clerk, incumbent for reappointment Patricia O'Connell, to a term ending 6/30/2019, excuse me.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I would move appointment of assistant parking clerk Tracy Cecil, excuse me, for a term ending 6/30/2019.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have Veterans Council Committee representatives appointed by organizations. AMVETS Post 70, James Sawyer, term ending June 30, 2019.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have the follow-up of a initial discussion in terms of making the Board of Selectmen's meeting more efficient in terms of business and a little more welcoming and comfortable for folks who appear. So the town manager's office, Julian Suso, Peter Johnson Staub, and of course Diane Davidson have done a lot of work on kind of grounding down what could be more efficient for us and the folks in the audience. And this is the kind of initial plan. Julian, do you want to give us an overview?
Certainly. Yeah, thank you. The, in the board packet, you received first a sort of one-page summary that Diane has very ably prepared that takes a look at the, as Madam Chair has noted, on a calendar year basis, it does also include, the last quarter of this year, of course. But the point is, on that summary, attempting to work in your meeting framework in a more efficient way, specialty meetings that need to occur throughout the year, because I think it's based on a quarterly by quarterly basis. The impression can often be that the board is not meeting as often as you actually are. And as you will note from that summary, in the course of business, 6 joint meetings per year, or at least between 5 and 6, are very common, including 2 with the planning board. And in the last quarter of this year, Diana suggested 3 dates as well, which are in the bottom here, for upcoming joint meetings. But continuing on that, there's also the provision annually for 3 workshops, and we're adding committee interviews to that, which we have not had in the past, which we feel will really enhance efficiency. We have the budget presentation and strategic plan retreat every year. The budget presentation, of course, is in January. The strategic plan retreat has more recently been in the month of June. And the suggestion is in the draft month's calendar attached that there be a June date set exclusively by this board for committee interviews and appointments, so that no other business would be transacted on that date, and really just bringing in for interviews and appointment those committee members so that they are most efficiently dealt with and can be handled in a single night. Obviously, if 1 or 2 individuals can't make a certain night, that can always be carried with Madam Chair's concurrence to a subsequent meeting. But really letting candidates know that that's going to be the night. That's what we're anticipating. June is really the ideal month to do that, and that they can anticipate it and get in their calendars in advance as well. And continuing the 3 joint meeting dates that were suggested, looking at what lies ahead for the last quarter of this calendar year, Diane suggested, we've been anticipating a joint meeting with the Conservation Commission. The suggested date was September 17th, the Finance Committee, October 22nd, and the School Committee, December 10th. Obviously, those are not cast in stone, but are dates that have been suggested that sort of work into what appears to be your upcoming calendar dates for, again, the 4th quarter of this year and all of calendar year 2019. And so the pages that follow talk about how those are worked in. As you can see, we jump over on the backside to September with your 2 regular meeting dates along with Labor Day on Mondays, and the joint meeting would be tucked in between so that every Monday would be taken up either with the holiday or a regular business meeting or your joint meeting with the Conservation Commission. And then jumping to October, you have a similar situation with the Finance Committee worked in. One of the things you might want to think about is every Monday is, you have 5 Mondays in October, along with one of them being Columbus Day, which is a town holiday in the Commonwealth. And you might want to consider leaving one of those Mondays open because you have a similar circumstance coming up where you're sort of, you have relatively little flexibility. So you might want to think about that, whether you want to have Monday, October 1st, as well as Monday, October 29th, Selectmen's regular business meetings, because you end September 24th is also a Selectmen's meeting. So you really have back-to-back-to-back Selectmen's meetings stacked in there. But again, it's up to the pleasure of the board, and you can always vary from that.
And the joint meeting could have some business part of it also with the Finance Committee.
Absolutely could, yes.
Because I like the date of the October 22nd Finance Committee meeting, the joint meeting, giving a good deal of time before town meeting, but we can certainly deal with some of the issues then.
Could I have make a suggestion?
Just let me answer
Okay.
that first. So, part of this came, with consideration of meeting every week. And this is a step back from that really serves, the working purpose. So I think there's an upside to not ending every meeting toward 11. This might allow us, if we have a few extra meetings, to end some meetings 9:30-ish or something. So it might be worth trying this schedule for a while, and then in seeing, if it has the desired effect. A couple of other things on the joint meeting schedule, there were a few subjects that just kind of rose, like the accessory apartment bylaw was not working well at first, and so it was this board's instigation that got the boards together and got everyone talking in the same room, and that kind of broke the logjam of the impractical issues into being really well worked at this point. So, from the board, I want to, just ask for suggestions for the agendas for the joint meetings, and also putting out to those committees, Conservation, Finance, and School Committee, to send me your ideas in terms of putting the agendas together. And then just to address the committee interview date, that's a sea change for all of the committees. What that is going to require is a lot of coordination beforehand, where each committee can start looking out and, kind of advocating and interviewing folks who might be interested in volunteering for their committee. When you have more, oars in the water, more folks on the committee, makes the work lighter, more productive. We always benefit from, lots of volunteers. So part of that is going to come from coordination with committees, which I know Peter is going to lead in terms of looking at mission statements. That's something that our, one of our first outreaches brought out in terms of a need. And so while we're asking every committee to look at their mission statements, make sure it makes sense, look at putting together, a policy update maybe for the way that their committees work, and look at the way you outreach for new committee members. So the fact that we're now having an annual appointment day gives everyone, on the committee, no matter which committee it is, kind of a target date or a goal for that. So I just kind of wanted to look at the way this all fits together. Doug and then Megan?
So I'd like to suggest that we consider being flexible about whether or not they come to our meeting or we go to theirs, because I think that we could easily go to a Conservation Commission meeting an hour early, ask our critical questions, and get an update as to what the current status is, and maybe within an hour have addressed most of the concerns, and maybe if we run a little long, their meeting starts a little late, I think it'd be more convenient for them and, more accommodating to them.
The only issue with that is oftentimes there are several boards that need to come together, so but certainly it could be considered on the Conservation Commission meeting time.
And especially I think about the Conservation Commission meeting, one, because I know I spoke with Betsy just by chance at the supermarket. She's going to be away on the 17th, and being the chairman, that's probably not the best date.
She's not the chairman.
Oh, she's not anymore?
She's not
Oh,
currently
excuse
the
me.
chair.
Okay, but that,
Oh, right, okay. I forgot that.
so we'll look and make
All right,
sure
well,
of
we-
point taken.
availability.
Just throw that out there.
Yeah, point taken. Megan
Okay.
and then Sam?
So just a couple things. I think the value in my mind, I know we had this conversation, it's what prompted some of this, is that the committee interviews and appointments, the way that they've fallen on the current agenda, it's generally further along in the night, and as things get longer, people who are looking to try to volunteer for a committee are sometimes here until 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. So I think to separate that out and make it more efficient, as you noted, and maybe make it a little bit more welcoming. One of the things we heard was that sometimes people feel intimidated by the process, and some folks who may have a lot of valuable insight and experience to share on a committee might be hesitant to come forward. We heard that this weekend at the listening session. So, to have a meeting that's, just focused on committee appointments and maybe has a different feel to it, I think is a good way to start to look at that. But just to clarify that obviously if if an opening happens on a committee, as it sometimes does, at a date that isn't this date, we're gonna still see those folks. If it's a I don't want anyone to think that because they don't miss, they don't hit that window or somewhere close to it, that your committee's gonna be sitting there absent, an individual. Sometimes you have people who, have to leave committees or, pass away, as we've had with, Scoba Roads on affirmative action. And so, when those things happen, we'll certainly still hear those and put those on our agenda. But I think it's a nice way to really look at both efficiency and respect for volunteers, as well as, responding to what we heard this weekend about kind of comfort level. And we can kind of think about, think about how that meeting works. So I like that.
Very good point. Sam?
First of all, I don't see the ZBA listed in here as a group that we'd have a joint meeting with. And since they issue the comprehensive permits for 40Bs, I think we need to include them in some sort of joint meeting.
Absolutely. This was just by way of example.
There's a couple of just open joint meetings with no committee written in.
Yeah, it wasn't obvious to me
that for you to determine how you want to do that.
That we weren't just going through them individually, but and that's my second point. I feel like the one time we had everybody together was important, and we were marching down the road of having some sort of a joint vision for Falmouth. And that seems to have gone by the wayside. And yet I think that's absolutely critical in coming up with a joint vision and planning meeting where we get all the groups together. Because I do feel like we're in silos frequently, marching to different priorities, different ideas of what the town should be in the future. And somehow or other we need to have a dialogue so that we can actually work out some of these things, and at least understand where they're coming from.
I like that.
And I agree that I think that large, kind of that initial meeting that we had where we kind of invited a number of, boards and committees was a really nice, so if we kind of play with this. But again, I know that these are just sort of placeholder ideas that.
Should that just be an annual winter event?
Well, that's the other thing. The event that we had at the yacht club was, really a good opportunity just to, for the free flow of ideas because it was so casual. So maybe in the planning of the next outreach, maybe you could add that to your thoughts, Doug?
Sam.
Or Sam, rather.
Sure.
In terms of Doug and Sam are next up, and that might be, something to, Sam, when you talk about that joint vision, I think that's another way to get at it.
But yeah, conceptually we're looking at how we make the calendar work. And then we can think about, maybe we have one meeting with planning board and then instead of two, that other meeting is, ZBA, planning, another one of those joint meetings.
You're required to have two by charter.
Oh, I'm sorry.
with the
Okay, so
planning
maybe
board.
where the extra is that we.
The extra could be ZBA easily, yes.
Yeah,
And the way they come about, it's really about the problem or issue at hand a lot of times. So it might be something that needs input from health, from ZBA, from planning, so,
But just to clarify, the planning board, I know we're required to have two, but it doesn't have to be exclusively.
Correct.
Planning board. So that's what I was saying. We could have one that's just planning board,
Good
and maybe
point.
one that we do
Excellent
that
point.
bigger joint
Which is what we
piece,
did
which is
last
what we
year.
did last year,
Yeah.
which had a nice feel to it. But anyway, I think this is great. I really commend everyone who worked on this because I think it's going to be really helpful. And once we actually set a calendar for it to be available for people to look at, so they really have a sense of what's happening, in the town, even if it's as a proposed calendar, that we have it somewhere that the public can understand and see some of these outreach and the fact that this board is meeting, it's just not like we just pop in every other week, but, as all boards are, it's really doing trying to kind of maximize our time.
And this came out of our strategic plan to increase communication and coordination of boards. And, I think this is, every year we hone it and get better and better. Sam?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think there needs to be some kind of a document that comes out of these meetings where we can reach consensus. We should be able to record it because people have convenient memories. We all do. And so I think if we're going to come up with a vision, there ought to be a statement, that basically says, out of this meeting came this vision of what we want Falmouth to be over the next 5 to 10 years, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now.
There was a sense of place meeting a while ago. Maybe I'll try to collect some of that information from history to see what you might want to do with it.
So you're thinking something, a statement that might be drafted during the meeting, then sent back to each meeting, each committee to ratify? Because you wouldn't be able to ratify it at that meeting itself, but.
Yeah, no, it can be a working document, but to me, we need to try to work on editing something, a document that captures our words and vision. I think it will help us all focus toward a common vision if we do it that way.
Right.
If everybody's just working out in the wings, you know, and nobody ever talks to the other person, which I think frequently that's what's going on. You know, we assume everybody's watching FCTV when we meet and talk about these things. I think that's a bad assumption. If we can get together and actually come up with an agreement in a statement form, I think that's going to go a lot further to helping unify the actions that are taken by the separate boards.
Megan?
Or if we're, you know, if that's kind of too sort of difficult in terms of creating something, if we're coming together for an agenda item, as Sue was noting, like, you know, something that's, you know, of the essence in the moment or topical, like some
Accessory apartment.
accessory or cultural residency, because we've just heard a whole bunch of things about, and so we focus on that, and we have kind of a statement or you know, a vision or whatever it might be about that particular kind of challenge or issue. You know, I'm just thinking that that's probably a more sort of more workable, and maybe in the long run more helpful if it's really specific about where we see all of these committees coming together on affordable housing, right? So if we were to focus on that, and how does each committee or board, what do they bring to bear? What is their vision? Can we come to a common understanding about where we're going on that particular issue? I think that would be something that would be really helpful, because it can be very specific versus kind of a longer or a broader vision, which I think loses some of that detail that we really, I think what Sam is saying is to kind of have some accountability, some institutional memory about what these boards discussed.
Institutional memory, I think, is a better term for it.
And it moves an issue.
I think rather than just have them be generalized discussions, that we target some things for voting. And then we take some votes at these joint meetings, and then we'll have some action and some concrete results.
So certain things, you know, give themselves to that, you know, to a vote, but we can certainly, you know, that seems to be what this board wants to do, was come out of those meetings with something tangible. So we'll work on that for the agenda.
Great.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Very productive. Next, we have minutes of meetings. Let's see, first we have
another document in there on committee reporting.
That was part of the presentation.
I think it was just showing who's
online.
That's fine.
First, we have the public session for June 18, 2018.
Well,
Madam Chair, could I just clarify?
Yep.
The board's not suggesting that this is your confirmed schedule for the balance of the quarter and into the year, or are you desiring to have that confirmed?
Well,
I think we've already voted a schedule up to a certain date.
I don't think you've gone through December, though.
Okay. So do we want to
On that-
vote this?
On that question, can we
Yeah.
revisit my suggestion about attending other committees' meetings to fulfill that joint meeting idea? Does anybody else like that idea?
well, I think we should be negotiating with them to come up with one that's consensus, you know? It's
So-
fine for us to go to,
So what it would be is we'll determine the agenda, invite the committees that touch on that agenda, and then try to pick one of those committee meeting dates to attend, that all of the Board of Selectmen can also attend.
I don't think it has to be one way. I think this is great. I like this as a plan. But I think as we get closer, within, let's say, 3 weeks of that particular date, that we should have an agreement, and if we need to slip it a couple of days to meet on a particular committee's regular meeting night, that's fine too.
So we can vote it other than the joint meeting days, and for the joint meeting days, we will make efforts to meet on the date of one of the committees invited to the joint meeting.
So in other words, these three meeting dates of 9/17, 10/22, and 12/10.
Right.
We're indicating those will be our meeting dates. So with conservation,
Well, no,
finance, and school.
Doug wants to, in other words, we might have health, planning, we might have 4 committees on September 17, depending on the agenda. And so rather than us deciding a date, he wants it to at least be convenient to one of those committees.
Or we can adjust. I'd like just to build in some flexibility
That's what I think.
and adjust that we can either attend theirs or they can attend ours. I think, for the most part, I think it would be more helpful if we attended theirs and if we started to have a policy of going that hour early. I don't know what do other people think of that. Is that sensible?
Well, first of all, again, it's not one board usually. We usually have several boards.
Mhm.
And as far as, it's not them coming to us, because we have other business at our meetings. That's why we have an additional.
This is a completely separate
meeting.
But for these three that we have for 2018, I think we should ask if we can be invited to their meeting. I think for the September one, the Conservation Commission, I think if we could go to their meeting for an hour, and for the Finance Committee, I think if we went to their meeting, and for the School Committee, if we went to their meeting, and we have enough meetings around them to be able to do our business, not at their meeting.
Right, but what I'm not apparently conveying is, for example, very likely to conservation, I'm going to invite water quality, I'm going to invite health, and whoever else is relevant to the issues on the agenda for 9/17.
Oh, I see.
That's
Okay.
how-
I wasn't getting that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, for the other two, the Finance Committee, I think,
That's only.
Finance committee can likely be separate, right?
Mhm.
And school committee can be separate.
I think
Okay.
So that's why I'm saying we'll make every effort to coordinate that.
But why are we including the other groups on the
Because
Conservation meeting?
It's not about conservation. It's about issues that
Communication.
the town's dealing with that also are common to conservation and perhaps other boards, planning.
ZBA, certainly.
Exactly. When you look at the accessory apartment bylaw, that involved ZBA, planning, health department, and I forget who else.
So one
it's
agenda-
Well, I
about-
understand that for the planning.
We're solving a problem usually.
I understand that for the planning, but the Conservation, I don't.
one agenda item I would love to get on this for the joint meeting with the Board of Health, the Planning Board, and Conservation Commission is there either through financial encouragement or through regulation, we can put in the nitrogen treatment plant for new construction? That is there a way that we can make any new building put in something that deals with nitrogen going into the system? Denitrification system.
So
And that would be involving, as I understand, the Board of Health could even actually just put that regulation without anybody else doing anything. But I'd love to talk to them about that, because I think the Conservation Commission would be in support of it. This is something that came up at the Buzzards Bay Coalition meeting I went last week, and that would be a great time to talk to these three different organizations.
So
about it.
can we add that to the September 17 agenda? And then we can see if water quality, health, and planning can come, and everybody here on this board can come on the date the Conservation Commission meets around 9/17.
And so we would want Water Quality Management Committee, Conservation Commission, did we say ZBA is part of that, or?
Board of Health.
Board of
Board
Health,
of Health.
that's right.
But not planning. Did you
Not
intend planning?
Not planning, that was a different list
Okay.
I was looking at, sorry. But
So
it's,
three,
unless
Concom?
they have a nexus that you can,
Yeah, I mean.
they might
you
have a
know,
nexus
as-
with that.
As the sort of chief land use planning board, it's, it's sort of central to.
And planning,
Yeah.
that's what I was, okay.
Could I make a suggestion?
Megan.
I absolutely appreciate, and I think it's a great thing for us to try to go to their meetings. I think we're talking about two separate things, though. I think one thing we're talking about tackling or looking at an issue or a few issues that we put on an agenda, that we invite the relevant, committees and boards to come and speak on. That, to me, is something different than if we go to conservation to kind of just, in general, look at either one issue or, so in other words, I'm slightly uncomfortable with us saying to conservation, we're coming to you with agenda items we're gonna pick, and you're gonna meet an hour before. And, I think we just need to decide exactly what we want these meetings to be. So if we're going with our own agenda that we put together as a specific agenda for these meetings, and we're asking everybody to meet, I just wanna make sure we're clear about what we hope to accomplish.
So as chair, my thought was to not do anything different than we've been doing it. The way, and we, other than, we can certainly move places of meetings, but the way it works now is we started having joint meetings and asking, health, planning, whoever, school, you know, what's something that what's that topic that could benefit from conversation with the Board of Selectmen? And we invite the relevant boards. That's why it's a joint meeting, and it's about solving a problem. It's about, you know, having
Whatever
its
Doug
issues.
just brought, yeah.
It's not just, I mean, we can show up at conservation to learn about a conservation meeting anytime we want. That's not what it's about. It's a sort of a workshop meeting between a number of boards. And Doug just gave a, you know, terrific example of an item that takes a few boards to talk about their viewpoints of, to see whether the initiative can be moved.
And I would leave it on the 17th. I agree with Megan. I would make that our meeting, our topic, and we're inviting people to it, as opposed to some of the other meetings with the Finance Committee and School Committee where we're maybe going as guests to just open up communication where we don't have a topic. And we'll see what happens when we get later in the new year.
Well, and I don't know that, I don't know, you know, like we can, you know, anyone can go to any meeting. I don't really want to, you know, I want to think about what it would, sort of the point Megan was just, what is it, you know, in terms of the charter about the Board of Selectmen deciding to come to your meeting?
I guess we're just trying to maximize the productiveness of, you know,
Everyone's time.
Of everyone's time. I'm not really concerned so much. I mean, we can all go, and everybody here has lots of committees they already go to, and they sit in on, whether they're because they're the liaison or because they're just interested in it. I really like the idea of having those action items that you get because you're communicating with those committees and boards ahead of time, picking the 3 things or whatever it is.
And it's not all for the board. It's not always the Board of Selectmen picks the agenda.
No, I think that's what you're saying. You ask
I ask
them.
you, I ask them, I ask, you know, so that way we already have Doug's ask and we know who needs to be in on that. And then I'll get 2 or 3 more. And that's also how the timing is picked on the joint meetings. Sort of, it's about, you know, what are the hot topics, what really needs attention. Doug?
Well, if I could, one thing that I'm hoping to get from the joint meeting with the Conservation Commission is a better understanding of their big picture of their philosophies and what their feeling is of their responsibilities in town and where they put those priorities. So I don't know if that's something that's involved with other committees. It's more of a Board of Selectmen to the Conservation Commission. I hope we don't lose the opportunity to have that discussion.
Right, well, you know, they're, you know, they have a jurisdiction and a mandate, you know, through the charter and you know, through Mass General laws, local law, all that kind of thing. So I think those kinds of pieces of information can be discerned when you talk about certain topics. You know, it might be, you know, how does it work when you know, you have maybe a dredging issue, a water quality issue, such as, you know, where there are many disciplines involved, such as Perch Pond. You know, and what is the place, you know, for that discussion? We already know what the mandates are, and then we know in certainly that example, there's, you know, been, you know, probably tens, you know, probably 40, 50 hours worth of work and conversation done about that topic, like just looking at it like a prism from different, you know, how do we solve it within the guidelines and the laws. So that's a sort of a staff process, and then when they bring that to the applicable board, you're right, it, you know, that, you know, sometimes happens in isolation. You know, one board, you know, decides its piece, the next board decides its piece, and, you know, when it's something, you know, that's a broader issue, it certainly is the topic of a joint meeting. So I know what you're getting at, and I think as we have these joint meetings, the philosophies are going to come, you know, they will come out of it. Megan?
I just think it would help us to better answer these questions. When we get so many emails on a particular subject, I feel like I should be better educated as to why these things are as they are. So.
But I think we can drill down on that a little bit by having, if we have, you know, Perch Pond is another great thing to discuss at this particular meeting, okay, to get some information on. But, you know, I understand there's 2 things going on here. One is the idea of just creating better relationships, and that is sort of, I understand the impetus to want to kind of go and just sort of be a guest at their meeting, which I think has lots of value. But I think when you look at a calendar and you kind of see the finite time everybody has, you know, is it more useful for us to sit down with Finance Committee and really have a separate agenda, go through some of those things, some of the things we talked about tonight, hear from Finance Committee about some of those capital concerns that they have, because they really look at that budget in detail. Some of the operating, budget concerns that we've been hearing from people and that I know they hear and that they have. So, I really want to use that time to problem solve, to discuss. I think you get to know the philosophy better when you hear from the members versus just attending the meetings, which again, it's great for the people part, and that's really important. But we're trying to do that in other ways with some of those more social events and going to committees as liaisons. I think it would be great to have problem solving. I think it serves the town better for us to try to solve problems as kind of in a more collaborative way.
And that's been the foundation of last year's meetings, have been problem-solving meetings.
But I understand the goal of running some of these dates by these committees to make sure that those make sense to them and that, obviously we want a good turnout. So, I think there's some feeling of kind of the Board of Selectmen just saying, this is what we're doing, this is when we're doing it, versus, these are just some proposed dates. Let's try and make sure it works for instance,
and actually, that's how it works. It certainly is, staff calls up, what's convenient for you, who's available, well, so-and-so has a vacation, okay, we can't do it that day. It's a very collaborative process just to even set the dates.
Yep. So I just want people to understand that that's what's, so we're not dictating. The conversation's been going on. That's how we're getting some of these dates here.
Absolutely.
So can we have one agenda item of just that generalized philosophical discussion of the understanding of the process?
We can ask Conservation if they want to explain to the Board of Selectmen what their mandates and rules and jurisdiction
In
is.
their general overview of their responsibilities. I just want to kind of get to know better where their feeling is, towards how they operate.
I think we could do that in the context perhaps of a topical issue and maybe have, just Conservation give us an example of what, the way they problem solve or how they deal with items that come before their board in a general way.
Like, for instance, roadway projects. Do they have purview over roadway projects and the discharge into ponds and bays and stormwater management? Do they find that that's part of their purview? I'm curious of those questions.
It's kind of something you just have to kind of ask town council too. It's as opposed to,
They do have some purview over portions of roadway projects.
it's kind of, that's a tricky question.
It is,
Depending on where the coastal areas fall.
But I think if we picked a few issues that are really important to people in town, and we can kind of talk through that, I think that helps us understand, first of all, their mandates, as well as kind of, the way we look at it, however, anybody else looks at it.
Let me give you a good example, okay? So when we had the highway director in here talking about the paving projects, I commented, I said, you're doing a great job with the paving, everything's straight and level and beautiful, but what about the bottom of Thomas Landers Road dumping into a pond? So I want to know if the Conservation Commission feels a responsibility to have a purview there, or if they feel like that's none of their business. Because that's a big picture question that's important to me, and I don't know that it's being addressed.
So that would typically go through, that would be a question to the staff, town manager, and that would come back to, the information would come back to you about, yes, no, and why.
Well, sure, but I mean, it's also kind of a judgment call.
I don't think it would, I understand that at the end of the day, they're responsible for, the decisions they make, but there, I think, are some pretty strict parameters about what they're going to be, the areas that they really are responsible for weighing in on and managing and making decisions on. So I think,
I think we can do
get the answer to that.
a primer to get at the jurisdictional
Mm-hmm.
questions that you're raising.
Okay.
And, if it's the pleasure of the board to have the entire board hear that primer, or if it's something that we just do offline with an individual selectman. But I think, I think we can approach the global issue that way, and then I think we could get at some of the more philosophical issues about how do you approach it, or get at how it really works in practice with some of these examples, such as, The Perch Pond issue is, it's moving through staff and Water Quality Management Committee, but I think that could be a really good illustration of, okay, here's where, there's some judgment calls to be made, here are the parameters where there are no judgment calls.
Right, like clams versus nitrogen and oxygen, and what's the priority?
I think a specific example can help to illustrate that.
Right.
And also benefits, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but this is the last I'll say, but also benefits, at the end of the day, all of this is for the benefit of members of our community. And so
Right.
at the end of the day, the benefit to the members of the community is if, number one, we all have a better understanding.
Right.
Number two, we try to tackle or at least clarify a challenge, right? Get some information out there about things that people keep asking about, and that
Right.
may be incredibly complicated that we as a board are not qualified to talk about. As a board, we are not qualified to talk about all the things going on in Perch Pond, because there are many things going on there that have nothing to do with this board, and it would be inappropriate for us to,
And it's
go on a long time. It's
another
appropriate in
board's
that-
jurisdiction.
Correct, it's
Right.
appropriate for that other board and for all of us to have that conversation.
But at the same time, the final end result and the end product of what our conditions are is somewhat of our responsibility as well.
Right, which is why we're having those meetings to kind
Right.
of try and hash that out, get on the same page and
it's
get
something-
information
And
out.
a lot of people have the same concerns, the same questions, and so it's helpful information to put out there, absolutely.
So just to go back to Julian's question, that set all of this off. Do you need us to, are you going to get back to us with another, do we need to, in
I
other
think
words, we have to
can-
vote this calendar?
We can vote the calendar without the joint meetings, is that how most helpful to proceed?
That's welcome.
Can we vote it with the joint
Well, you could,
contingent
or
upon-
you could just vote it with the joint meetings, but without specifying, there were just 3 of the joint meetings because they were the soonest ones where Diane suggested specific committees. We can leave that off and just reserve the dates for joint committee meetings, and we'll fill them in later, if you like those dates for joint
That
committee.
seems more,
Or just give you the flexibility if these dates aren't working to reassign them.
But if.
We'll find
you know,
somebody to go to
That
those
gets really
meetings.
tricky.
Yeah, it might be helpful to have as a
Oh,
place,
okay.
we can always reschedule it, you're right, but it might be helpful to have the full annual calendar to say, this is what we're trying to work around.
I
And if we
move
change it,
Peter's
change it.
suggestion.
Let's go with it then.
Second, the template.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we're going with the template.
Yes, thank
thank
you.
You guys
Very
let us know.
helpful. That was
Thank you.
a lot of work and hopefully should have a big impact. And minutes of meetings, public session, June 18, 2018.
Well, I find it substantially correct, and I move approval.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have public session, August 6th.
No, I only have one public session, that was just.
I had-
Open session,
It's the
Monday,
executive.
August 6th.
I have August 6th.
I do too.
I only have August 6th in executive session, and we had the open session. I thought we just voted on the open session.
That was the June.
That was June 18. We did June 18, now we're doing August 6th.
I don't have June 18th. I
And
withdraw
now I'm
my
looking for
motion then.
June 18. I was like, oh, good, Sam has it, even though I don't.
I don't have it either.
All right,
I
then we're
thought you-
gonna,
I'm sorry. I
we're
thought you said-
gonna,
No, I only have August 6th as well.
so we're gonna unvote June 18 because we meant to say August 6th. Sam had said it was substantially correct. Does everyone
Second.
still agree?
I
Okay, all
agree.
those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
I move
Then we
approval
have,
of do not release up for the executive session of August 6th.
I just have one change.
Well, go ahead.
I guess it's of the text, it's the 4th paragraph. There's the word officer on the first line.
yep,
I think it's supposed to be offer.
yes. Makes sense.
With that change, I move approval.
Second.
Could I interject on executive session minutes?
Please.
I normally don't interfere, I apologize, but in the last couple paragraphs where we're talking about a discussion and it characterizes some comments from Mr. Suso, I would ask if I could adjust those. It also attributes
Why don't we hold this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hold
a
it.
comment to Mr. Jones that actually should have been made.
Okay.
I agree. Let's,
Although I'm delighted with what Mr. Jones has characterized as saying, but could I tweak that slightly and
Yeah, let's have that
come
come
back
back.
to the board if you would allow?
Yeah, just have that come
Thank you.
back to us.
we'll
Okay.
postpone that.
So we'll hold that.
Yeah, thank you.
Next, we are on individual selectmen's reports. Mr. Brown?
Well, so, I was very interested at the Selectmen Counselor meeting when I asked Secretary Ash, how do we get money out of an environmental bond bill? And I mentioned that we've been expecting this, what was it, $4 million for 4 years now to fix the southern end of our bike path. And I was very happy and encouraged that after the meeting, he came up to specifically ask me, what was it again that I wanted the money for? And I told him it was for the bike path, and how we had an email from a lady whose young child had fallen and luckily wasn't injured, but it's a heads up that these roots are sticking up and causing a dangerous situation. And I said, you know, we hold out hope that we're going to get this money year after year, and we don't do our own bike path, but we probably should just go ahead and do it. And for one thing, he said, you probably should just go ahead and do it. But the other thing he said was, you should also probably go to an agency that can get that money out. Because we can't just send a letter and say, can we please have the money? We need to have a sponsor. And in this case, a representative from Bourne, the assistant town manager in Bourne, or administrator, I should say, came up and offered that he thought that the Department of Conservation and Recreation would be the way to go, because they're the ones that are funding the studies and looking into extending the bike path up into Bourne. So when I spoke with Mr. Suso about it, he said that his recollection was that Dylan Fernandez had already tried that.
Right, we met with them last year.
But maybe it's time for another letter and reminder to ask Mr. Fernandez again to try to get that money out. And if we don't get the money this time, I think we should fund that bike path repair ourselves.
And I think maybe also just follow up with Secretary Ash in terms of fitting in the request in another manner, since Doug, you really brought it to the head with him, and, you know, he kind of gets the issue. So
right.
Maybe strike while the iron's hot.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if that goes in writing, maybe Doug could sign it, having, you know, spoken with him personally.
Right.
Sam?
Just making that same topic, I mean, the aha moment for me was what Secretary Ash basically said, if it's in the environmental bond bill, it's just given a status of a priority. But unless there's funding to actually execute it, it may not go anywhere. And I don't think any of us understood that. We thought it would get on a track for funding. He said,
Well, I kind of had that inclination, that's why I asked him.
Yeah. It could just, it's a theoretical thing until it actually gets to attach to a funding, and that's where the challenge becomes.
Sam?
Oh, yeah. National Night Out for the police was excellent. CPC meeting is working. They haven't started looking at the applications, which were due on the 8th of August. That's going to be their next few meetings. I did attend an Oyster Pond Environmental Trust meeting, which was joint with the Water Quality Management Committee, looking at the whole issue of how can they reduce the nitrogen loading in Oyster Pond. Should they be going alternative, innovative septic systems, or should they be thinking about sewer? And of course, there's always the question, they don't want to invest money individually when in fact the sewer might be mandated at some point. But it was an excellent meeting and a lot of dialogue, and there were about 60 people there. The residents in that area are very interested in trying to make improvements in Oyster Pond. And so I think, you know, I pointed out that in fact we need to be thinking about moving the sewer from that Trunk River bicycle path area because it's so vulnerable to being knocked out by coastal storms. Maybe we can actually use this as a way of prioritizing the sewering of Oyster Pond and creating a leg, if you will, that will take out a portion of that vulnerable sewer line. So that's out there, and I think it's being discussed. I mentioned it to Julian, and I understand that John Waterbury, you know, has kind of picked up, or has actually advocated for looking at that as well. Because if you can avoid that one area where Trunk River is, you can actually get rid of a lot of the coastal vulnerability for that main that's already there. Plus, where that main has broken several times also. And John Waterbury was telling me that it's because of the saltwater intrusion in that area. It's degrading, corroding the pipe, weakening it, just as was described by Steve Rafferty for water pipes. Well, the same thing is true of the sewer pipes as well. So anyway, but that's a dialogue. Of course, the Water Quality Management Committee is only focused on reducing nitrogen loading, so they literally have deprioritized doing anything with Oyster Pond. They're focusing on these eastern-facing estuaries that are further to the east. So we need to look at it from a broader perspective, and wish Charlie McCaffrey had been there representing
Coastal
Coastal
Action,
Resilience
yeah.
Action Committee, because I think that's an opportunity that we should be looking at and seeing whether it might, but anyway, I went to that meeting and it was outstanding, and I really commend the people that live in that area for trying to move this issue forward for that particular pond on their own initiative in cooperation with the Water Quality Management Committee. Also attended the One Cape Summit. I know several of you came and went, Julian and Peter and Doug and Sue, and also Charlie McCaffrey was there most of the time. Tom Bott, our town planner, was there for one of the days. Also Charlotte Harris from the planning board were there. So a number of people came and went, and there were some other folks that I saw at distance that actually live here in Falmouth that were there for various interests. There were a huge number of regional forward-thinking kinds of issues that were discussed in that 2 days. And it kind of prompted a lot of that, my thinking, and when I was reviewing that capital plan that was presented, I'm thinking, gee, we are not taking this seriously far enough out in advance. And I think we're making a mistake. I mean, I can't tell you how impressed I was with the 300 committee that started buying properties and taking them out of development back in the 80s. That's the kind of forward thinking that we should be trying to support and remind everybody that we have to, because it makes it so much easier to adapt if you start looking at how you're going to respond early on and make wise investments to ward off the big coastal storm damages that we're going to have. Where we are in environmental remediation, wouldn't it have been so much easier if we'd started 20 years ago? Because I could tell you, in the 27 years that I've lived here, I can't believe how much degradation has occurred to the water. I moved up here from the Chesapeake 27 years ago, and I said, wow, the water's so clear and pristine, there's eelgrass, this is heaven up here. It's not that way anymore.
Well, the bill for sewering was a little steeper, the original proposal, so I think that threw us off track a little bit, but certainly we're getting it done now, and your point is well taken.
Yeah. And a lot of the discussion was basically looking and saying, look how much we've accomplished. An awful lot of that is strictly on paper. It is not really. Fortunately, there are sewer projects going on in Chatham and Harwich, and there are and there's alternative approaches being approached and looked at it seriously, which will help us avoid some of the bigger costs. But the challenge is enormous, and we don't have any real evidence right now that shows we're making any progress. And that's the sad part of it all. Anyway, and then there was discussion around the disparity between the affordability of housing and the salaries that are available to pay for housing. Big issue that is not really being addressed in any significant way and is not going away. And one of the things I would say, this is coming up in our budgeting process, but it comes up in terms of selecting our tax rates, but one point that was made is about 40% of the properties on Cape Cod are second homes. And Dan Wolf is the one that said, those people are basically reducing the supply of housing, therefore pushes up the demand. So the disparity between supply and demand, because so many people have bought second homes, has just skewed the whole need. And so maybe the only way you're ever going to be able to sort of equalize that is by a bifurcated tax system, where people who have second homes are picking up a little bit more of the bill to try to push that balance of supply and demand of housing to a more equitable point for those people who basically are 45 and younger with families who can't afford to live here and perform the professional jobs that we need, but not just professional jobs. We're not talking about poor people. We're talking about from 120% of the average median income right on down to the people who are really struggling to make it at all. So I think the challenges that came out of the meeting are real challenges, and I hope we can pursue and be successful in chipping away at some of those, but I hope when we're doing capital planning and operational budgeting and what have you, we're keeping those long-term challenges there and looking at ways we can actually try to remediate in many of those areas. So that was it. I did go to the listening session with her. I also went to Troy Otter's, the Eagle Court of Honor, which was always a joy. And then the road race, which was a real pleasure. And I was with the Rotary Club helping greet the wheelchair contestants as they finished. And for me, the highlight was seeing 9-year-old Madeline Wilson come through in her pink high-performance wheelchair. And she just was beaming ear to ear, and her father, who was escorting her on a bicycle, came through, and he was justly proud as well. But she was such a spirited young woman, and to see her lift herself around primarily just with her arms because she doesn't have the use of her legs, but see the pride of accomplishment that she had on her face just made that a special race for me. And there was another young lady about the same age who was there helping one of the Rotary Club members' grandchildren, and she was just this sprite that just helped around, was always looking for ways to help. But when she saw this young lady in the wheelchair, racing wheelchair, come in, you could see her mouth almost drop open. She was just in such awe of this young woman's drive and accomplishment to do that road race as she did, and do it quite competitively, actually, for a 9-year-old.
What a beautiful description.
Anyway, it made this particular road race especially special for me. So anyway, so that's.
I actually had a couple more items I hadn't.
Go for it. Go for it.
So I was going to mention the road race as well, and what a positive atmosphere that whole thing was. I enjoyed the race. It was, I think, the most fun race I've watched, with the finish there with the kid from Canada coming across the line. He was so excited. It was really fun. And then the reception afterwards, I got to sit with Julian and Stephanie and Robin and we met Laurie Doer, the new superintendent, and her husband. They're very nice. She seems really sharp, and I'm really excited about her. So the other thing I wanted to mention was that the Coastal Resiliency Action Committee was not able to meet at its last meeting, but just a heads up that we all got the report on Minot, and I think it's really important that we look at it. And keep in mind that it was a request from the engineering department to look at the feasibility of whether or not we're going to keep that road and how long it's going to last. When I attended the presentation from John Ramsey from Applied Coastal, it seemed very clear to me that he was looking at the models. He's using new specific models for this project, and before he did his modeling and his study, the life expectancy for that road was 30 years. When he did the modeling, and I asked him pointedly, I said, when I look at your numbers, it seems to me that the life expectancy is more like 15 to 20 years, and he was in agreement. He said that with his proposed 3 small groins and 117,000 cubic yards of sand, that the life expectancy would be closer to 50 years. So that's a huge difference. And at the meeting, the last Coastal Resiliency Action Committee meeting, some of the members were kind of skeptical about the groins and wondering if it's really worth it and is it really going to be helpful. So I think it's going to be incumbent on the board to read the study and make their own conclusions and be prepared for the presentation with an open mind.
And take into consideration the committee that we've tasked with detailed review and kicking the tires.
Absolutely.
On the report.
Absolutely.
Very
And they're
good
very
point.
qualified, but we still also need to know it for ourselves.
Well, it's also a matter of sorting out the priorities.
Yep. Right.
You good?
Well, the last thing I was just going to mention, not really a town-related thing, but we had an event. I wasn't part of it, but I was just attending the Sousa-Palooza at the Holy Ghost Society. It was a fundraiser for a young Falmouth girl who's struggling with cancer, and it was a really fun, great community event, and it's just another example how when anybody's in town needs a hand, this town is there.
Absolutely.
So it's great.
Well said. Ms. Braga?
All I'll say is just great listening session. Really pleased, and I think I've already gotten a lot of feedback from individuals who say they don't come to these meetings. Some people were really honest and said, I've come to meetings in the past and I didn't really, they didn't say when, but I didn't feel really welcome or comfortable there, and that they, this one individual said more meetings like this because it really helps us, connect with the board, and also just, feel like we actually have a way to be heard. So.
And Dave Vier did a great job.
He did a great job, yep.
And I think when everyone hears that there are so many issues that are important to people, it kind of lends to understanding of budgeting and sort of how we sometimes, we have to wait for one thing and do it, on the next cycle. And so I think it's such a great community understanding. It's going to be a tall order for Sam and Doug to figure out, another great outreach session, but.
Well, I want to say thanks to Megan and Peter for framing the conversation, to make it so constructive.
And for you.
Well, I had some input, but those guys finished the details, and for Phyllis for coming early and setting up.
Oh, really great job. And Peter, doing a lot of the setup, and Julian
Keeping
was
us
there.
on
And
task.
lots of folks, from
Department heads
town
coming
staff
out.
and department heads, so really lends the discussion to a whole, more detailed level when staff can hear what people's concerns are.
And town meeting members
And
who
town
showed
meeting-
up. I mean,
Huge.
we targeted them to show up. I know some folks felt like there was a snafu with their email. We'll kind of sort, for some people, I don't know. I know some people, it was in their spam.
I can
but-
clarify that
Yep.
real quick, if it's okay. So there was an initial invitation that went specifically to town meeting members in East Falmouth, because this was in East Falmouth and we wanted to connect people to their precinct members. That was one of the outcomes of the first session. There was a second announcement as part of the broad distribution PSAs that went to all the town meeting members. It went to the whole list.
Yeah. And so again, some folks, I had somebody who then found it in their spam. So for folks to check that, but the point is, they showed up, town meeting members showed up in good numbers. They met some of their constituents. For some people, it's the first time they connected to who their town meeting members were. So really big thanks to the town meeting members for to really stepping up and coming in and being part of that session. It was very helpful.
Great, Doug?
I'm still recovering from the road race yesterday.
Not bad.
It was fantastic. Seeing all those volunteers, the organization make it run so smoothly is amazing.
Really, really
Yeah.
great. Police, all the, people who are on deck ready to help. It just ran terrifically. Mr. Suso, Town Manager's Report.
Thank you. Just a reminder that, to the board, that Zoning Board Administrator Sri Boudreau has announced her retirement, of course, effective in October, and we have begun the advertising and search process for a qualified successor. Also, another reminder that work continues with consultant Weston and Sampson on the wind turbine alternatives analysis, which was authorized by the board earlier this year, and I do hope to have a final report to present to the board in early fall. And as has been noted, I was pleased to attend the Friday portion of the Cape Cod Summit in Harwich, including the Selectmen's breakfast meeting on Friday morning, and it was an enlightening event, and happy to be able to get back and get ready for tonight's meeting as well. That concludes my report.
Mr. Johnson-Staub?
All set.
Anything to add? Great. In that case,
Motion to adjourn?
second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pat Thatcher.
And I'm Margaret Gifford, and we're from Sotheby's International Realty.
And you know, Margaret, I think the word that best describes this real estate market this year is opportunistic.
I think that's a great word to describe what the real estate market's doing now.
I think it is also. And that says, if you're a seller, by golly, get your house ready correctly.
And if you're a buyer, do your homework.
So if you want to be part of this opportunistic real estate market, jump
on that horse.
Carlson Printing for all your printing needs. 508-548-7303 or toll free at 1-800-696-7303. Our email address is carlsonprinting@aol.com. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs.
Hosting services for fctv.org are provided by Meganet Communications. Meganet offers a wide array of internet services, including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server co-location, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their number one goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or meganet.net.